right, everyone. Well, it's 6 o'clock. We'll be joined by the mayor shortly. She was just delivering a proclamation with the labor secretary just down the street. So we're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. We begin our meetings with an invocation, which we mark with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight, the Boy Scout Troop 100 will be approaching the podium to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So everyone, please stand for the invocation. All right, Troop 100, would you like to come up?
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. They're here earning a badge on citizenship tonight, which is very cool. So welcome to them. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Clegg. Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Willits. Whittings.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Great. And next on the agenda, we have item 4, request for approval of the city council minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting of November 1st.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the work session and regular evening minutes from November 1st, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willits.
Yes.
Whittings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right. And next up on the agenda, we have some very special business. I know that the mayor really wanted to be here for this, and so I hope that she's able to make it soon. We have a very special group of young people with us tonight, and that's our Youth Climate Action Council. And we will be ratifying all of your appointments to that council this evening. So thank you for being here with us. To get that done, I think that we can likely do it in one motion, but I will invite anyone who would like to come up and make comments in front of council to please feel free to do that. So with that, we have the confirmation of Isabel Alvis Reyes, Amulia Tenikela, Lillian Stahlberg, Esther Davis, Gavin Cloyd, Riley Chung, Pierre Johan Len, Hannah Amick, Johanna Catherine Benavides, Sky Cambron, to the Youth Climate Action Council for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask for unanimous consent for the confirmation of all the above young folks to the Youth Climate Action Council for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Without objection. All right, do we have any council members who have comments before we hear from folks, or would you rather hear from our Youth Climate Action Council folks first?
Madam Mayor, I'm wondering if they'd stand up in
Oh,
case some
yeah.
of them don't want to come speak. At least we know who's in the audience that's getting appointed.
Yes, please stand if you're comfortable doing so.
Super.
Thank you so much. And if anyone would like to offer comments, the floor is yours to do so. Try not to be too shy.
Madam Mayor, I've got something.
Yes.
So I had the wonderful privilege to get to say hi to you at your first meeting. It was probably about a month ago at this point, and it was really exciting for me. It's really exciting any single time you get to see young people who will be not only the future leaders, but our current leaders right now, and that are stepping up to make a difference. And it's exciting because you know that like good work is going to continue on down the road. But I was a little embarrassed because during the opening session, there was an icebreaker, and the icebreaker was, what is your favorite Taylor Swift song? And I didn't have a good answer at the time. So I did some research, and there were lots of really great ones to choose from. And then the one that I settled on was actually a duet with Taylor Swift and James Taylor. and they sang Fire and Rain as a live song. And the reason why I like that one so much is that neither one of those people are from my generation. There's somebody who's actually, maybe Taylor Swift is, I don't know, a little bit under my generation, and somebody who's on the other side of my generation. And it's really
Wishful thinking,
exciting.
Jimmy. That was
That-
wishful thinking on Taylor Swift and your generation.
I was in my 30s not too long ago. Anyway,
Like last
I
week.
think the reason that I settled on that song and I thought that was really exciting was this gap of somebody who had proven themselves, somebody who had done a lot of work, who was a master storyteller for generations, and their voice lives on. And then somebody younger coming in and partnering with them. And that 20 or 30 years down the road, she's going to be the one who's going to be the older person, and she's going to be passing on her song to another future generation. And I think that that's really important with all the work that we do, is that we recognize all the work that's been done by so many people in the past, but we also make sure that we're eager to pass that on to future leaders. So I'm so excited for you all and the journey that you're about to go on, and the leadership that you're going to bring to this community in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Other comments? Well, I'm just going to pipe in. I love that you all stepped up to face this challenge. We have very aggressive climate goals in this city, and we think that we can do it. And the reason why we think we can do it is because we've had input from young people throughout the many years. When I first came to council and served on the Public Works Commission, I remember we were looking at recycled water, and the response between generations was just shocking. You know, you had older generations who were like, oh, recycled water, like we're going to drink water that used to be pee. This is horrifying. And then younger generations were like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we recycle water? Like, this makes perfect sense. So I think it's really remarkable that you all stepped up to offer that fresh perspective, because, you know, this world is yours. And we really owe it to future generations to make sure that we're doing our very, very best in preserving the wonderful things that we have. So I appreciate you stepping up very much. Any other comments before we move on? Right.
I'll take an opportunity,
Yes,
Madam
please do.
Mayor. Congratulations to all of you for stepping forward. I know that there are some folks who are harboring secret wishes to do what you're doing, and they're looking for a sign that they too should step up and take on a leadership role. Sometimes when we hold those leadership roles, we forget how powerful we are. And the power that you hold is to create the space so that those folks who may be a little shy and they don't recognize those leadership qualities within themselves, that you can be the one to identify them. So I would encourage you, as you move forward and you take advantage of even more leadership roles as they open up, that you look around your immediate community and you help identify those folks, and you can be the person to make them feel welcome and to step into their full flower like you are doing. So thank you so much for doing this, and congratulations.
All right, last chance. Oh, yes, please come up. Come up to the microphone so that we can all hear you. And just let us know what your name is, please.
All right. My name's Hannah Amick. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys for having this Youth Climate Action Council in general, because it's super cool to have a platform where we can actually bring change to fruition in this cool city. And also today is like a pretty big day because the world's population reached 8 billion, which is kind of crazy. And the fact that cities like Boise are adopting these Youth Climate Action Councils and making these policies is super cool. And I really wanted to thank you. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Anyone else from the Youth Climate Action Council? All right. Well, thank you again for being here. And we very much look forward to your wise guidance as we move forward on our climate goals. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have the appointment of Ben Taylor to the Plumbing, Mechanical, and Fuel Gas Board for a 4-year term ending November 2026.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent for the appointment of Ben Taylor to the Plumbing, Mechanical, and Fuel Gas Board for a 4-year term ending November 2026.
Without objection? Do we have Ben with us tonight? Clerk, is Ben online by chance?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Ben is online in a moment.
Ben, would you like to say anything with your appointment?
I appreciate it. Really appreciate you guys taking the chance to let me get in on the board and hopefully help the city move in the direction that they need to move in, and be open to anybody in their comments. So I don't know if you can hear me or not, but just want to say thank you and look forward to the 4 years helping out.
Yep, we can hear you and we appreciate your service, and we appreciate you being with us here tonight. We have a big book of business right now in all of these areas, and so your service is really appreciated, Ben. All right, next up, we have the ratification of the appointment of Amanda Ryan, Tim Flaherty, and Paige Oding to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, I'm going to amend that. Ratification of the appointment of Amanda Ryan to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2023.
Madam Mayor, I request ratification of the appointment of Amanda Ryan to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2023.
Without objection? Yep. Amanda, are you with us? All right. It doesn't look like Amanda's with us tonight. Madam Mayor, we're on item 13 under special business.
Great, thank you. Sorry I'm late, everybody. I was giving comments and signing a proclamation on National Apprenticeship Week with the Secretary of Labor who's in town. And I'm so sorry that I missed our Climate Action Council students. I was able to see some of them as they left. So number 13, we are ratifying the appointment of Tim Flaherty to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2027. There's a lot of people here tonight. Is Tim here? All right, Tim, let us know if you're online. Without,
Madam Mayor, I request unanimous consent for the ratification of the appointment of Tim Flaherty to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2027.
Without objection. And now we will move on to the ratification of the appointment of Paige Oding to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2027.
Madam Mayor, I request unanimous consent for the ratification of the appointment of Paige Oding to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board through October 31st, 2027.
Without objection. And now we'll move into, welcome Josh, the revised findings for DRH 22.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So on September 13th, the council upheld the applicant's appeal of DRH 22-00123, and it instructed staff to come back with a revised conditions of approval and reasons statement for the decision. That's in your packet tonight, and we would request your approval of that document. I am available for any questions.
I reviewed the amended conditions of approval and findings and move that we approve DRH 22-123 revised findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Whittings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now for the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda, but pull items 19 through 28 for separate consideration.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Whittings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And would you like to pick up all these items as one?
Yes. So Madam Mayor, we pulled these items at the request of Councilmember Willetts. And earlier tonight, we had a work session that detailed our commitment to protecting parklands and open space. And this is the first group of resolutions that places those deed restrictions on current parks owned by the city of Boise and open space owned by the city of Boise. It's a pretty large group of parks. And so we're doing them in several smaller groups alphabetically. The first one of these is Aldape Park, which is my neighborhood park. I'm very happy, very excited that it will be protected into perpetuity. And so I move that we approve RES 668-22, 669-22, 670-22, 671-22, 672-22, 673-22, 674-22, 675-22, 676-22, and 677-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, thank you, Councilmember Whittings. I think this is such a remarkable opportunity that it deserves some additional discussion. We've had a work session on it. You know, one of the things that makes Boise so special is our parks and the fact that we do have parks in this city. We want to preserve our parks. We don't want those parks to be developed because we want to be able to walk to them, enjoy them. And this is the first step. As the Pro Tem said, we are doing the first 10 today, including some in West Boise, including my neighborhood, DeMeyer Park, and also Charles McDevitt Park. And we're protecting those so that we can make sure that they live in perpetuity. We also had a presentation at the work session about a separate effort by community members that may go even a step further. We'll know more soon whether that will be on the ballot or not. But I think this is a great first step, and we need to celebrate it and ensure that folks know that this is important to the city. Thank you.
All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Whittings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we will move into ordinances. Looks like we've got two on first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the first reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 53-22, an ordinance CAR 22-00013 for property located at 2171 East Danzy Drive, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from A-1 open land to M-1D/DA, light industrial with design review and a development agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 54-22, an ordinance CAR 21-00032 for property located at 6780 South Cole Road, annexing 2.2 acres of certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 2.2 acres as C-2D/DA, general commercial with design review and a development agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. And now we've got one on second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 51-22, an ordinance enacting a property tax rebate program as authorized by Idaho Code Section 50-235, reaffirming that $1.2 million has been appropriated to fund the tax rebate program, providing instructions and deadlines for property taxpayers to apply for a property tax rebate, setting forth the formula to be used to calculate property tax rebates, providing a method for distribution of property tax rebates, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. We have an ordinance on first, second, and third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ORD 55-22 be suspended, that the portions of Idaho Code, Section 50-902, requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and that the record show it has been read the 3rd time in full.
Second,
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Whittings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 55-22, an ordinance CAR 22-00007 for property located at 915 North Shamrock Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from A-1 open lands park zone to R-1C single family residential zone, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change, providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I move that ORD 55-22 be approved.
Second,
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Whittings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we will move into the public hearing. This is an appeal, so DRH 22-74. It's an appeal, so we will start first with city staff, Caitlin Manouge, and then Bonnie Hardest. Hi, Bonnie. Bonnie is the appellant, so are you still representing? Are you speaking tonight? Okay, great. So as the appellant, I'll have you up, and then we have the applicant. We've got Deb Nelson, and then also Trevor Nickel Lincoln. Oh, it's just you. Okay. And then neighborhood association. And then we'll go to the public. And then a rebuttal by first the applicant and then the appellant. I have a list of folks that have signed up, but if you didn't catch the sign up sheet and I don't call your name, just know that there'll be a chance for you to sign up and stand up and testify if you're a party of record, which I've also got a list of, and we can just go back and forth and check if we need to. So I've got these that I'll start with, and if anybody's online, we'll do the same thing. I'll probably start with folks in person and then move so that people can go home if they want, and then move online after that. And you can we'll give you a chance to raise your Zoom hand once it's time. So with that, go ahead and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Caitlin Manouge with the Design Review Division. And before you is an appeal of DRH 22-00074, an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a design review application for an industrial warehouse development comprised of 7 buildings totaling approximately 1.2 million square feet on 78 acres. The design review application was submitted on March 1st and approved by the Design Review Committee at their May 11th hearing. The appellant party, consisting of the Blue Valley Tenant Association, Blue Valley Owners, and South Eisenman Neighborhood Association, appealed the approval on May 20th, 2022. The Planning and Zoning Commission denied the appeal at their September 12th meeting. The appellant party appealed the Planning and Zoning Commission decision on September 22nd, and now the appeal is before City Council. It is at the discretion of City Council to consider any evidence or information in their decision. The project is located off Winco Court on the east side of Eisenman Road. The Blue Valley community is located to the north, and the Winco Distribution Center is located to the south. Blue Valley is a legal non-conforming use that was approved in Ada County through conditional use approvals in the 1970s and annexed into the city of Boise in 2013. The zoning of the subject property is M2D heavy industrial with design review, and the proposed industrial warehouse buildings are an allowed use in this zone. The land use designation of the subject property and surrounding area is industrial. The applicant is proposing 7 spec industrial warehouse buildings totaling approximately 1.2 million square feet, and the applicant will be constructing Winco Court from the southeast towards the northwest of the site and will construct Warehouse Way within the existing right-of-way on the west. Building A, the building closest to Blue Valley, is oriented so that the truck docks are on the opposite side from Blue Valley, and the applicant is also proposing a landscape buffer along Building A. The appellants referenced the Boise zoning ordinance appeal findings as their grounds for appeal. The submitted materials do not demonstrate that the Planning and Zoning Commission decision violates constitutional, federal, state, or city law. The applicant is required to follow all requirements and regulations of the departments and agencies. Therefore, the planning team does not find this a valid ground for appeal. The commission's decision was also not shown to exceed its statutory authority. The proposed uses within the project are allowed within the M2 zone. The Design Review Committee and Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the design of the project and included requirements to comply with the zoning ordinance and design review standards and guidelines to minimize impacts to adjacent properties within their authority. The commission's decision was not made upon unlawful procedure. All procedural requirements for a design review application were followed, and the Design Review Committee and Planning and Zoning hearings were held in accordance with Boise City Code. The submitted materials do not demonstrate that the commission made their decision in an arbitrary or capricious manner, or that their decision was an abuse of discretion. The commission reviewed the project in accordance with the applicable design review approval criteria. The project approval includes a number of site-specific conditions to minimize impacts to the adjacent property, many of which exceed those required by the zoning ordinance and design review standards and guidelines. The submitted materials do not demonstrate that the commission's decision was not supported by substantial evidence. It is apparent that the design review approval criteria have been addressed to the action letter findings, analysis, and site-specific conditions placed on the project. Traffic impacts will be minimized by the roadway improvements that will be constructed per ACHD requirements. The applicant completed a traffic impact study and will construct new northbound center turn lanes on Eisenman Road. New public sidewalks will be constructed along the roadways adjacent to the project. Pedestrian connections and bicycle parking will enhance the pedestrian and cycling networks. The landscape berm along the north will provide screening that exceeds zoning ordinance requirements. All drainage is required to remain on the site, and the applicant will provide an erosion control plan and drainage plan to be approved by city staff. The building designs comply with the design review standards and guidelines requirements in terms of massing, relief, facade design, and architectural details. The project minimizes impacts to the adjacent residential use by providing an increased north setback, installing the landscape berm along the north, limiting truck idling hours, and restricting light levels. The planning team does not find this a valid ground for appeal. The applicants were agreeable to a number of conditions that mitigate impacts to the adjacent residential use. The approval includes the conditions that limit the hours of truck idling, specify a design for the north landscape buffer adjacent to the building, clarify drainage requirements, limit light levels, and screen mechanical equipment. The Planning and Zoning Commission included 3 additional requirements: that Building A is to be constructed first, that the north privacy fence is to be located at the top of the landscape berm, and that the rooftop equipment on Building A is set back from the north. The planning team believes that with these conditions, the project will adequately mitigate impacts and comply with the design review findings. The code does not require the applicant to eliminate all impacts to surrounding properties, as it is expected that the industrial uses allowed in the zone are dependent upon industrial activity. Adjacent to Blue Valley, the applicant is required to provide a 50-foot wide landscape buffer consisting of a 10-foot grass buffer with drainage and a 40-foot wide terraced berm with a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees, a 6-foot fence at the top of the berm, and there are no truck docks on the north side of Building A. The parking there would be for employee and visitor parking. The building is approximately 120 feet from the north property line. The buffer condition requires an alternating double row of trees, with each row being planted no farther apart than 80% of their mature width. The conditions also require the applicant to complete the buffer prior to occupancy of any buildings, and Building A must be constructed first. In conclusion, the planning team recommends City Council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of the project, and I'm available for questions.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, and just if the record would please reflect that the council president has joined via Zoom, and then Councilman Bajent, did you? Okay, and then Council President Pro Tem.
Thanks, Caitlin. I've got 3 questions to make sure that I'm right about a few things. First, this is all within the airport's area of impact. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, council members, that is correct.
And then second, the proposed use complies with all of the requirements of the zone in terms of setbacks, building heights, all that stuff, right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Badgett, that is correct.
And then on the design review issue, which is the only thing that's in front of us, the finding was that this application met all of the requirements of our design review process. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Badgett, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just had a question about the landscape berm. Is the applicant also responsible for maintenance of that berm? Because there's I believe I saw that there was a fence kind of at the top of it. And so I'm worried about the other side of the fence.
Madam Mayor, council members, our code does require that all required landscape be maintained in perpetuity.
Great, thank you.
Anything further? All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, yes, sorry, Council President.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you for, sorry I had to join late, but here I am. I had a question about the size of the trees on the landscaping berm to the north between the development and the Blue Valley development. It appears that there's quite large trees, but on the rest of the site, it appears that most of them are quite small. And I wondered if that meets our design review requirements. It seems like they could be a fair amount larger.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, our minimum landscape requirements for new trees are generally 3-inch caliber for deciduous trees, and all evergreen trees are required to be 8 feet in height.
Thank you. So that's at time of planting. What are the requirements for the size the tree will become when it's mature?
Madam Mayor, council members, we do not have a requirement for the mature height of the trees. We generally choose trees off of the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide. So class 2 trees are generally what we would like to see, and those vary in mature height.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further right now? Okay, and we'll have the appellant come on up. Bonnie? Or whoever it is, whoever is going to speak on behalf of the appellant. Yeah, it looks like they're coming. So I just, given that you've all got to share time, I'd suggest that are you starting and then?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay, I misunderstood that. Sorry, Bonnie. I'll call you up for the next part. So is it the two of you, just so I know going into this, is it the two of you that are speaking now as the appellants?
Yes. He won't speak unless you have a question.
Okay, great. All right. Go ahead.
Mayor, Council, my name is Dennis Walker. I'm managing member of Blue Valley LLC. My partner and I, along with our families, have owned Blue Valley for 36 years. I would like to take this opportunity to thank former Mayor David Beater for the following words regarding Blue Valley. Quote, somewhere in the past, government let these folks down. If you have an opportunity to make right what wasn't, we in government ought to take that opportunity. Approximately 20 years ago, city planners mapped out what today is called the CCDC Gateway East Urban Renewal District. Within those boundaries, they saw one residential community. When they created this district, they fundamentally changed the future of the residential community of Blue Valley. Creating this district placed the well-being of this community squarely in the lap of this city. 20 years have passed, and the city has done nothing to fix the problems they created for Blue Valley. Blue Valley has not been treated as a stakeholder with long-term property rights. Instead, Blue Valley and its residents are repeatedly forced to play the unwanted role of adversaries before this council. Has there been any protective planning by the city to prevent obvious land use conflicts between Blue Valley and developers before they materialized? Yes, there has been. It is stated in the zoning codes of this city where it says M2 land should be separated from commercial or residential development, and M2 uses should not create hazardous conditions. Without input from Blue Valley or its residents, this city rezoned the land under and around us to industrial use, ignoring this guidance. As the city or CCDC fostered community engagement with Blue Valley and its residents to discuss how we can benefit from the urban renewal process? Has the city or CCDC conducted any traffic impact analysis or mitigated substandard conditions for Eisenman Road? Eisenman Road does not meet the standards for industrial use. Eisenman now services thousands of additional cars, trucks, causing thousands of dangerous interactions with the residents of Blue Valley. In addition, the city continues to ignore flood control problems as structure after structure is added to the Gateway Project area, creating more and more runoff through our community via 5 Mile Creek. What meetings have taken place to make sure that planned facilities are placed away from sensitive receptors like Blue Valley to mitigate environmental issues, protect property values, and quality of life? The Lincoln property representatives will tell you that they performed the due diligence required by the city. That may be the case, but city officials are not doing their jobs when they approve projects that are so clearly detrimental to others. The real responsibility for those who oversee zoning is a moral one, is about social equity and respect for those who live at Blue Valley, a community in existence for nearly half a century. There are no boxes for Blue Valley residents to check. Blue Valley and its residents are stakeholders with inherent rights. They rely on city officials to perform not only their legal obligations, but their ethical duties. Those officials have the duty to protect and enhance the safety and general welfare of its citizens. That is also stated clearly in the zoning codes of this city. Before this council decides where we go from here, we urge you to think a second time. Think about what Blue Valley is, what Blue Valley and its residents are being forced to accept, something that you would not force on any other neighborhood or homeowner in this city. We ask for the same respect. We ask that you take the opportunity that Mr. Beater spoke about. Please take this opportunity to make it right for the community of Blue Valley. Thank you, Mayor.
Any questions? Okay. We might see you up at another point. I'm going to now move on to the applicant, Deb Nelson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Deborah Nelson, 601 West Bannock Street in Boise. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant requesting that you deny the appeal that is before you. The property that is at issue is 78 acres just off of Eisenman Road to the west. The future land use map designates the property as industrial. The property was zoned M2 heavy industrial in 2001. The property's industrial zoning is consistent with the entire Gateway East corridor, the city's primary area identified for future industrial growth. As shown on this zoning map, this property has heavy industrial to the south, east, and northwest. Nearly all of the property in the area has industrial zoning, and the areas not already zoned as industrial are designated on the future land use map for future industrial zoning. The industrial park use at issue in this design review application on appeal is an allowed use in the M2 zoning district on the property. The applicant did meet with the Blue Valley residential neighbors on several occasions to understand their concerns and has taken care to implement specific design elements to minimize impacts on their neighborhood. And I'll highlight some of those elements shortly. The council is hearing this application tonight on appeal from the commission's approval of a design review application. Under the city code, The council must deny the appeal unless the appellant shows the commission's approval was made in error. We are in full agreement with the planning staff's analysis that no error was committed by the commission in approving this design review application. The commission properly determined the project met the applicable design review standards with the addition of conditions expressly agreed to by the applicant. The commission's decision is entitled to due consideration based on the commission's substantive expertise in applying the city's design standards and evaluating development projects. In their briefing submitted to the council in support of their appeal, appellants have asserted that this commission failed to follow certain guidance in the city code and under LUPA. Neither provision cited by appellants is applicable here. First, the appellants point to Boise City Code section 110406(1)B. The appellant mentioned that again this evening in his testimony. This is the statement of purpose for the heavy industrial zoning district. The provision does not support any finding of error in this case because the commission decision does not involve any zoning decision. The decision only relates to the design for an allowed use within the M2 zoning district. Second, appellants pointed to Idaho Code section 676508A. This is the general policy language in state code that lists 17 components that cities should take into account when drafting a comprehensive plan. This statutory provision does not provide any grounds for error in this case because the comprehensive plan adoption is not at issue in this matter. Appellant's primary argument on appeal is that the project's industrial park use should not be located adjacent to the non-conforming Blue Valley residential use. Compatibility of uses was not before the commission in this design review application, only design. The decision governing what uses are allowed on the property was made more than 20 years ago. The city's design review standards specifically contemplate that industrial uses can and will be located adjacent to residential, and in those cases, structural design should minimize impact on adjacent residential uses. At best, appellants' arguments regarding compatibility and setbacks could be construed as an argument that the evidence in the record does not show that the design of the project minimizes impacts on adjoining residential uses. But here the record does show that the site design, building design, and conditions of approval appropriately minimize impacts on the adjoining residential uses, and while also recognizing that the project is allowed in the M2 zone and meets or exceeds all applicable setbacks in the zone. For instance, building setbacks have been significantly increased adjacent to Blue Valley. The closest building A is set back 120 feet, where only 15 feet is required under city code. The proposed building height to parapet is only 40 feet, where 55 feet is allowed in the M2 zone. The site design orients building A along the border with Blue Valley to act as a buffer between any industrial loading docks and freight area. On the north side of building A, within that increased 120-foot setback, the project includes a 50-foot wide and tiered 16-foot tall raised landscaping berm. The landscaping requires staggered rows of trees planted at 80% full occupancy, or excuse me, full canopy spacing. The setback, buffer, and berm design will minimize light, noise, and visual impacts on Blue Valley. The commission carefully evaluated the project site and structure design related and elected based on that design to impose additional conditions, all of which the applicant agreed to. Building A must be built first to act as a buffer, as was requested by the neighbors. A privacy fence must be built on top of the landscape berm instead of on the northern side of the berm. And all mechanical equipment screening must be set back further from the northern edge of building A to further minimize height impacts. The commission not only evaluated the project design to minimize impacts on adjacent residential. The commission also carefully evaluated each of the relevant design review criteria and appropriately found that they were met in this case. The commission properly concluded the site design minimizes traffic impacts on pedestrians and cyclists with sidewalks, landscaping, and safe parking design. Landscape screens buffer adjacent uses. The on-site grading and drainage will minimize runoff and provide erosion control. The utilities will be underground so as not to detract from the building design. The building massing is consistent with other architecture in the area and will be very similar to other warehouses in the area. And the facade openings are consistent with industrial design in the area, provide weather protection, offer visual interest, and avoid blank walls. Appellants have asserted the area roadways are not sufficient to support the project, but evidence in the record shows otherwise. The project's traffic impact study and ACHD's agency comments both concluded that with the addition of left turn lanes at the intersections of Eisenman at Freight Street and Winco Court, the roadways serving the project will continue to operate at full build out of the project at acceptable levels of service. The proposed industrial use is allowed and consistent with its longstanding zoning and the city's comprehensive plan for the property. The applicant has worked hard to accommodate the neighbors' concerns through thoughtful site design and the extensive buffering along the shared boundary. The Design Review Committee and the Commission have technical expertise in design review issues and both properly approved the project. Appellants have not provided support for their asserted grounds for appeal or demonstrated any error that would give the council a reason to reverse or modify the Commission's decision. For these reasons, the council should deny the appeal and uphold the Commission's decision. Thank you. I stand for any questions you have.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Deb, I just wanted to make sure in the rendering that you showed, it still showed the fence at the bottom of that berm, but it's my understanding that it's been moved to the top of the berm. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, the privacy fence was actually originally proposed on the north, up on the parking lot side. And then the neighbors did request a fence along their property, but a split rail fence so that it wouldn't screen the view of the landscaping from their side. And so that was actually designed as a split rail fence there after some discussion. And the privacy fence now would be located at the top of the berm.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. Deb, it looks like the landscaping is designed so that the trees nearest the top of the berm are either very large class 2 or class 3 trees to provide more canopy at maturity. Am I reading that correctly?
Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think that's correct, yes. And I believe there are conditions of approval from staff that also address the types of trees to make sure that they align with the city's tree standards.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And while our standards don't require larger trees on the rest of the site, I just would encourage you to think about the kind of canopy that you'll get for the water you'll be using on those trees. We are watering desert out here. We may as well get some, both some carbon sequestration and some shading of the hardscape that's going to be added if at all possible. So while I can't rule on that tonight, I just bring it up and encourage you to think about it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Bonnie Hardy, unless you're going to tell me I'm calling you at the wrong time again, representing the Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Hello, welcome.
And the council. Tonight, I'm going to let Brian Stevens, he is part of our neighborhood association lawyer, that he is representing us through fair housing, where we have submitted our request for reasonable accommodations that we haven't received any word on from the city. So I'll have him speak first.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, one part of,
Will you please read your name into the record? I
yes, my name
appreciate
is
it.
Brian Stevens. I'll be representing the Blue Valley Association. I'm at 1706 North 21st in Boise.
Thanks.
Thank you. What we're talking about here is 200 homes that have been put in an industrial economic development zone. And while there may be uses that are allowed in those industrial zones, I would like the city council to think about why we put industrial zones in and why we protect other areas within R2 zoning. The demographics of the community are that 34% are disabled. That's compared to 11% here in Boise in general, and 11% are Latinx or Hispanic, and that's compared to 6% in the Boise area. So the area has a significant increase in people of color, minorities, including people with disabilities. People with disabilities in this case are, some of their disabilities are greatly affected by air quality. The history, as many of you know, is that the United States Supreme Court banned explicit race-based zoning in Buchanan v. Worley. To cite the White House guidance letter regarding exclusionary zoning that was written June 17th, 2021, St. Louis in 1919 changed the area zoning from residential to industrial if too many Black families moved into the area. So these practices are well documented. In Seattle, 1923 zoning laws disproportionately changed zoning from residential to commercial where Black and Chinese American families resided. The term academics use for this process is called expulsive zoning. And the definition of one peer-reviewed paper defined it as the act of expanding noxious uses such as industry in poor neighborhoods and community of color, while rezoning more affluent and less minority neighborhoods to more residential-based zoning codes. In effect, bringing a noxious use to a community that can little afford to deal with the consequences. Disparity in treatment compared to Indian Springs, represented by South Cole Neighborhood Association. That case is where this city council rejected industrial use next to a similarly situated community where it doesn't have that same representation of minority or people with disabilities. And I just want to point out also that the city in the past has protected Blue Valley, as it was brought up earlier. They spearheaded an effort to bring in a buffer around the community. And city leadership has adhered to the principles promoting environmental justice issues, to quote the Boise's Climate Action Roadmap, to improve health and wellness and advance equity. I did look through the roadmap for equity issues, and I did not see much attributed to equity, but this would be a good example of how we could all work together as we go forward to address equity, because environmental justice is about equity. The Boise's regional analysis of impediments to fair housing 2021 states that the city has taken and continues to take actions to support projects that increasing housing that is affordable to all, to increase housing that is affordable to all. It cites Idaho Code Title 67, Chapter 65 of the Idaho Local Land Use Planning, and to provide accommodations for mobile home parks to be built in and around the area. This is on top of the fact that we do live in a community where we have a housing crisis. Blue Valley represents one of the last affordable housing centers in Boise at a time of increasing rents. Manufactured homeowners have made an investment in real property, and the increase in industry next to the park will displace disabled individuals who cannot stay due to disability due to air quality concerns, and force others to live with increased rates of pollution or other noxious nuisances. The area is improperly zoned to exclude these residents who are disproportionately Latinx, disabled, and lower income. The city has a duty to place measures, including adequate open space to protect residents and the right to be part of a community. And the real threat, I think, here is the diesel fumes of 200 semis that are going to be in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Madam Mayor, I guess I do have one question for you, sir. You know, we're not here on a rezone. And many of your points, I think, basically boil down to this is zoned wrong. But the history of the comprehensive plan makes pretty clear that the reason this is zoned industrial is because it's in that airport area of impact. In other words, it couldn't be zoned residential now. This neighborhood is kind of grandfathered in because of the way the history went out there, but you can't actually put houses there within the airport area of impact. That's how it landed industrial. I just heard all these Fair Housing Act arguments, and my question is, are you telling us that the airport area of impact and the decision to zone it industrial was a pretext for a racist housing policy by the city of Boise?
Well, I don't think it was pretextual. I think that, you know, where a neutral policy in place has a disparate impact on people in protected classes, there does exist an argument that the city has an affirmative duty to further the Fair Housing Act under 3608, which would be to remedy a situation where you see a disparate impact forming. And I think there's a bigger ethical issue as well within the Fair Housing Act, that we want to promote diversity in our communities and not take one community and push them out due to an industrial practice. I think a proper thing to do under the act would be to make sure that there is a proper investigation about some of the, especially the disability related issues that exist, on whether the 200 trucks per day is what my understanding of would be in the area, what real community effect with air quality standards would have that do. An airport doesn't present the same issues to a community as industrial park with massive semi-use. But I'm not saying it's pretextual. I'm just saying that oftentimes we make these decisions that have an impact and we don't fully analyze what the impact is going to be and what kind of residents we're displacing from our communities.
And I guess you feel that we can reach that set of issues here on a design review appeal as opposed to a rezone?
Well, honestly, I think I'm coming into this a bit late, but part of the appeal process is to see if there are laws in place that would affect this. And I think a fair housing analysis should be done by city council attorneys, and a proper health impact analysis should be in place as a condition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just follow up a bit on that line of questioning. My understanding about the history of this area, although the city annexed it industrial when it, or zoned it industrial when it annexed it some years ago, it had been zoned industrial, is my understanding, for many, many years while it was in the county. And in fact, this residential development was approved inside an existing industrial area rather than the other way around. My understanding in reading the record of that is that at least one commissioner recognized the potential problems with that and voted against it for those reasons. So my question to you is, we've now inherited what was likely a mistake many, many years ago. I know we have existing residents in this area. We have rules in our code, in our regulations, that when industrial use does occur next to residential uses, that a buffer will be provided and that the impacts of that will be minimized. And it appears to me that the applicant has done a fair job of working hard to meet that requirement, and the design review committee agreed with that. So what are you suggesting is our remedy right now? You're suggesting we do a housing analysis at a point in the process when it really isn't something that's on the table.
Well, I think Bonnie wants to answer
Yes.
this.
We've had this discussion before, Elaine. Blue Valley.
Bonnie,
has-
just because you're speaking for the first time, will you please read your name and
Oh, I'm
into the
sorry.
record? No, that's okay. Thanks. It's
Bonnie.
awkward because you're answering a question, but I just need you to do that.
Bonnie Hardy, 8301 Blue Heaven Lane, Boise, Idaho, President, South Eisman Neighborhood Association. We've had this discussion before about Blue Valley and their zoning. It has never always been. I just happen to have a copy of its history of zoning. That first one dates back to 1970. I think that gives us a little feel for how long it's been in existence. The existing zoning at the time of the conditional use permit, and this is from Ada County's records, shows R2. Okay, this property and all those other properties surrounding it in that industrial area started off as agricultural. And then it slowly progressed to rural transitional. Then it became R2, which is basically residential, depending on the acreage or how many houses there are. And that's what it was. And I have the documentation here. You're welcome to see it. When the initial CUP, the conditional use permit, was placed, how it gradually became industrial, which is an airport overlay. Once the city became involved with the property, they zoned it airport industrial. That was while it was still in Ada County. Once it was forced annexed into the city limits, the city's duty was it comes in on an annexation as being unzoned. Then it is the city's duty to look at the usage and apply the proper zoning. Now, Mayor McLean, you know we're residential. You've been to households out there with your husband, your son. You know there's vulnerable people out there. We are residential. We haven't been industrial for years. It's only, anyway, it's not being recognized as industrial. And it's not our fault. The city, Ada County, whoever wants to take credit for it, it's your fault. You know, we can't create zoning. I don't get a postcard in the mail saying, oh, you just been upgraded to industrial. We don't know until we have some conglomerate wanting to be built next to us. So how is that fair to the residents? So I say no to the zoning, always been. It hasn't been. So we need to correct the records to reflect that it was residential at one time. And how it advanced to industrial, we don't know. That's something you need to ask yourself. In addressing
So
Mr. Pageant.
Bonnie, I'm
Huh?
going to have you now. I think that was the answer to the council president's question. So your time's going to go back on. for
Okay,
your
could I
remarks.
answer?
Well, he asked, he can ask another question, but just to keep this rolling in
Okay.
proper order,
Okay,
I'm going to turn on, you can make remarks. You can incorporate that into your remarks, but he'd
Okay.
had the question for somebody else. Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you. Blue Valley is a residential community. We are legally grandfathered in per our conditional use permit issued in 1970. I have paperwork available. In 2013, the city forced annex Blue Valley along with 96 other parcels of land over 1,000 acres that were forced annexed. After the annexation, the city zoned us industrial, knowing our usage was residential. The city's failure to recognize our legal existence has violated the city's own zoning codes by placing an M2 heavy industrial zone next to a residential community, as stated in the zoning code 11-04-6. We are a residential development. Regardless of what the city zoned us, we are still residential. You still cannot place heavy industrial next to residential. The city's own actions demonstrate residential is not appropriate to residential. The city allowed Indian Lakes, another community in the airport district, to remain residential after the city attempted to zone them industrial. The community was also provided open space to prevent further industry from encroaching. Indian Lakes had to fight to get this protection. That's in conjunction with Mr. Pageant's saying that airport districts, residential shouldn't be there. There is another residential area that is afforded the protection. It's obvious there is an inequality between your treatment of Blue Valley when compared to Indian Lakes. None of the protections given to Indian Lakes are being given to Blue Valley. Zoning policies can have adverse impacts on public health and equity by subjecting poor and minority populations with noxious and environmentally risky land uses. Due to rezoning and expanding industrial zones in low-income neighborhoods, the legal mechanism of zoning changes contributes towards environmental injustice. This type of action taken by the city is termed expulsive zoning. Expulsive zoning is being directly addressed by the EPA with a new national office dedicated to advancing environmental justice and civil rights. Our appeal should be upheld because you are violating city code by allowing heavy industrial next to our residential development. Our appeal should be upheld because of the inequity shown with your actions regarding the Indian Lakes community. You are discriminating against Blue Valley community. Our appeal should be upheld because you are demonstrating expulsive zoning to eliminate vulnerable affordable housing that doesn't fit your city plan. This permit needs to be denied. Blue Valley deserves equal treatment. And I would appreciate it if you would look deeply at this proposal of 15 feet away from a residential vulnerable group. The 120 feet includes a parking lot. Buffers are usually pretty benign, which means the noise level isn't there. How is a parking lot considered a buffer zone? In California, when residential does back up against industrial, they say 1,500 feet. Is this 15 feet the city has? Is that applicable to residential? Is that where they're getting it? I don't see where they separate residential next to industrial, which should be a larger buffer. Because I know if anyone on this on the city council had an industrial building that close to your home, you would not like it. You would be worried about the health hazards it would cause your children, your elderly. And sometimes figures just don't fit it. 12, 15 feet, that's absurd. And they talk about that design review. We know that zoning isn't discussed in design review, but also at the end of the design review meeting, while they were still on record, design review, they put forth their concerns about what is happening in the Blue Valley. And they explicitly said, make sure this is communicated to the city council, because we discussed what Mayor Beater had said when the R&L trucking happened. I assumed after that little handshaking and presentation that it was going to be taken care of. We were going to have an adequate buffer. We weren't going to have to go up against another large company with, experienced lawyers. We're just laymen. We're just here fighting for our livelihood. And the city council needs to do their job. And you need to look at your current ordinances. They don't apply to residential next to industrial. That's absurd. You can look their buffer. Now, I'm not an engineer, but most buffers go up and come down. This one only goes up. So that doesn't create a buffer. It just puts their building higher. Their grading level is 12 feet above our grading level. How does that constitute a buffer? And according to the planning and zoning on page 6, it says the adjacent property shall be level. Your grading shall be level with the adjacent property. There's one thing in your planning and zoning that they said needed to be done that isn't being addressed. If anything, it's being heightened. And the erosion control, that place, and Mayor McLean, you've been out there, you've seen the erosion on the side of the road. So this French ditch they're going to put in, where does the water go? It's coming off your 15-foot berm within 5 feet of some people's homes that is not on a permanent foundation, and that water is going to go underneath their house. They didn't address when we asked for a geologic study, saying, wait a minute, that's volcanic rock, it's basalt. You can't just go out there with a grader and move it around. You've got to dynamite blast it. And there's a perfect example of a Red River development up north of us. And the blasting goes there, the dirt's in the air. We said we would like a bond put in place in case there's damages to those homes being within 5 feet of a berm that's going to be constructed, to make sure they don't have to go to civil court to get money to fix their homes, that it's available. That wasn't addressed. All these meetings we had with Lincoln, they left off the important information. We had to dig and ask. They didn't tell us that building A wasn't going to be built first. They didn't tell us that there would be dynamite blasting. And when I asked about dynamite blasting, I said, well, how can you guarantee me that it's going to be done properly? And they said, well, we have the best, excavators. And I said, well, who is it? And they said, well, we haven't hired them yet. So you're giving this permit to a person who doesn't even have a skill for their berm. How do you, they're showing this little person and, oh, they're way far away. That isn't real. Where is their scale? Usually I can look on something, I'm not an engineer, but it says an inch is this. Where is it there? This is absurd that you're giving them carte blanche to come in and destroy our neighborhood. I say you need to look deeper into this. You need to uphold the appeal. They need to resubmit and go through the process again.
Time.
Thank you, Bonnie. Are there questions for Bonnie? Thank you. So we're going to take, it's been an hour. We'll take a break every hour, 20 minutes or so. So since we finished the longer presentations and we're going to move into the public, After this, we'll take a 10-minute break and then be back. Great, we're going to go ahead and get started. Alrighty, I'm going to start with just the lists as I have them. I'll call up one and then let you know who's next in line so that you can start to come up here towards the front. First, we'll start with Ron Puccinelli and then Linda Puccinelli. And then after them is Dennis Walker, Sue Collins, and then I think it's Jeannie Garcia. No? Jean Garcia? Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. And if I call your name because you're on here, you don't want to speak, just let me know. You don't have to come up. That's okay. Thanks, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Puccinelli, go ahead.
Thank you. Keelan? I have a few PowerPoint slides to show. I'm Ron Puccinelli, 2247 Blue Lake Lane.
And we've got the clicker thing right there so you can move your way through.
I am not a protected class unless you count retired public servants. As I've spent 35 years as a finance director for a city in California. But I moved to Blue Valley about 4 years ago and been enjoying it. Been enjoying Boise and the people and the place, just amazing. The only thing I have, one of my jobs as finance director was to look at the projects and look for holes in them or to see if everything matches, everything makes sense. And in this project, I saw a couple of problems in the developer's presentation. And number one, in their representation, this is off of their proposal. And when did everything in Blue Valley become flat? It's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional rolling terrain. If you've ever been in Blue Valley, if you ever tried to bicycle the thing, if you're breathing hard by the time, because you're going up hills, down hills, it's terrain that goes around. Well, on the right side of that picture, that's Blue Sage Lane, which fronts their building A. The elevation at the base of Blue Sage Lane is about 3,008 feet, and that could vary because of temperature and pressure and everything else. But the top of it is about 3,022 feet that measures. That's about a 14-foot rise. The applicant doesn't show that in their submittal. They're just showing flat building, flat Blue Sage, and a flat berm. Actually, they don't even show a flat berm, they show a cross section of it. Oops, there. We don't know where that is along Blue Sage Lane or where that is, whether it's at the bottom or the top or the middle. What happens because the road rises 14 feet. That's a 12-foot berm. Actually, at one point in Blue Sage, you can walk up there to the top of it. If you look out through the back, you'll see that their land actually drops down slightly. Blue Sage actually is above their land. So there's conditions here that don't occur in their proposal. And how it affects what happens can make a big change to what happens in the field. That's what I'm talking about, not in the proposal, but in the field. What happens when you're looking at this thing? I'm going to skip that. So what do we want? We actually want to know, where's the base of their building going to be? You have a road that goes up, you have a building that's flat. Is it up here? Is it down here? We don't know, and it doesn't say in the proposal what the base elevation is. So that's a question. And it'll make a difference to the people who live in the park. How high is this 40-foot building going to look like out there? Are they going to sink it down a little bit so it's a little less acceptable? Maybe we can see the hills on the far side of it, maybe we can't. But, or is it going to be this
Thank you.
humongous thing.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep people to time and sometimes give an extra
Oh, I'm sorry.
sentence. But this was a good idea to have the slide because we can see these three things right now. Thank
Yeah.
you, sir, very
Okay.
much. And is Linda Puccinelli? Welcome, Mrs. Puccinelli.
I'm Linda Puccinelli and at 2247 Blue Lake Lane. Thank you for allowing us to voice our concerns. As a Blue Valley resident, I and my neighbors at this point are furious. We have been fighting this for years, and yet the city has and continues to ignore our rights as residents. At the September 12th meeting, planning meeting, the individual commissioners avoided looking at the Blue Valley advocates, which I've been noticing you all have been looking and paying attention. Thank you. Valley, as we tried to defend our rights, it was clear that their opinions had already been made and they were just doing a formal sitting. Despite the applicant's incorrect statement in one of their documentations that Blue Valley Community is an illegal non-conforming site, some of this you'll have heard before, it is in fact a legally non-conforming residential development in 1977. The city's error to recognize our residential development will currently does and demonstrate, where you've heard this term before, expulsive zoning to a disparate group of people. The city has not protected our residential community. In 2018, Gateway, a company hired by CDC to oversee the development of the area, lured the residents in to a presentation promising protection for the Blue Valley via large transitional zones in their long-term plans. That's a lie. They lied to us. In 2018, you've heard this one before, Mayor Beater stated publicly, I was there, that Blue Valley needs recognition and protection. He stated, if you have an opportunity to make right what isn't, we in government ought to. That is critical. I repeat, critical. Turns out, however, it's just been more empty words. Mayor McLean has often stated in the news and Idaho statements that it's critical for Boise to protect existing quality, affordable housing. Blue Valley is existing quality, affordable housing, of which you referred. We are a viable, well-maintained, diverse community with a high percentage of disabled, low-income, and Hispanic members. The current warehouse shipping depot project, over 1 million square feet, 100 bays, 3,000 parking lots, parking spaces, has given minor consideration for the need of provisions of what already?
Madam Mayor, I have a quick question.
It goes so quickly, but there's a question from Councilmember Halliburton.
Yes.
So you said in 2018, you had a conversation with a group and they had identified, I think you used the word a long buffer zone or was something like that.
What it was the gateway.
Yep. And so what I want to know is what your definition of that long buffer zone is, or what
That long buffer zone was at least, in our talk, was about 1,000 feet, so that we had plenty of well, space and for the wildlife, for the sound reduction, for all the things we're having issues with.
Perfect. I wanted to know what your definition was there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we've got Dennis Walker. And then Sue Collins. Okay, great. And then Tina Short. Oh, shoot, I should be checking. Excuse me, just a second. Tina, did you sign up because you're here with Jeannie Garcia? Great, okay. Then the answer of that is, let me just check. I think the answer is no. The answer is no. All right.
Well, thank you again. I'm not sure I have anything in particular to say that would change what's already been said.
Yes, and typically, sir, we don't have the applicant or the appellant, the applicant in this case, speak both as the applicant and then as a resident. So given that you don't have anything more to add than you already had in your time.
No rebuttal?
Yeah. Oh, that's at the end. You'll get to do
Okay.
that as well. All right. Thank you, sir. Ms. Collins. Let me just make sure. I'm going to be checking. Okay, you are a party record. Great.
Oh, there we are. My name is Sue Collins. I'm retired and I live in Blue Valley. And this is my backyard, taken off my deck. We have something really special in Blue Valley that other neighborhoods don't have. The quiet lake called Patricia, from Patricia Eisenman. It's home to over 100 varieties of birds, waterfowl, and other animals, over 6 varieties of ducks, herons, swans, geese, everything, turkey, vultures, curlew, even a pelican stayed with us last year. We have hawks that nested this year in 2 different places of the park. In the evening, you can hear coyotes. We have raccoons, snakes, everything that you get from the desert. And they co-live with us. I had a raccoon run right by my lake one day. So this is what Blue Valley is. This is what it's become. It's a very big safe haven. We had a blue heron, then the next year we had 2 blue herons. These are the ones that nested this year, the hawks, right 10 feet from the houses. These are some of the current local businesses that in our area that use manufacturing, moving, and distribution centers. So all of these people do moving with trucks. So when you say 200 trucks, then you have to look at all the other things that are surrounding us. This is the car auction up at the top, and the bottom, Mr. Gas. Oh my gosh, they just built this last year. There, every night I go and I count 100 trucks there in the parking lot. And in the summer, they run them all night long because of air conditioning. Yeah. These are recent planned projects, and they are all massive, massive inside. Like 594 vehicles for Gowan Road. I mean, here's where we are today. So Blue Valley was where it was, and now here it is right here. The dust, the trucks, the moving. And if you watch the roads, these roads are not conducive for trucks going back and forth. They aren't. This is what we are looking at right now. The Blue Valley's in the heart, and then the yellow is recent 1-year projects, and then the red is ones that are already here. All of these have trucking and moving in some sort. We're completely surrounded already. So what do? This is some of the, I took these the other day. There's accidents, there's trucks back and forth all day long. So the bicycle lane, this is the bicycle lane. There is none. There's no sidewalks for the kids. And we were cleaning the sidewalk and all these trucks coming back and forth. So this is where we're at. So I have a solution.
Ma'am, we're at 3 minutes already.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to, you can give us one more sentence.
One more sentence?
Yeah, because I mean, this is 3 minutes like last time, and I'm
Okay.
seeing a pattern here of going over.
The city owns 2 sides around Blue Lake. The city could put a city park there that could buffer Blue Lake forever if you put it in your city park plan. It could buffer it forever. Everybody would be happy. We would have
Thank you.
50% safety.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Lori DeCare. And Lori. And then I'm going to ask Kara Kane and Richard Llewellyn to come to the front.
I have some slides. Oh, Are they up?
And then
okay,
there's a
great.
clicker somewhere, Lori.
Oh, I get to do it myself.
Mhm.
Okay. My name is Lori DeCare. I'm representing Intermountain Fair Housing Council tonight for 696 West Overland Road, Boise. IFHC opposes the construction of Eastport Industrial Park next to people's homes. IFHC is particularly concerned about the possible displacement of protected classes in the park, families, as well as seniors and others with qualifying disabilities under the Fair Housing Act. Census data indicates that 6.6% of Boise residents are Hispanic, whereas Blue Valley contains 11%, a 50% higher percentage. Citywide, people with disabilities make just 11%. In Blue Valley, it's 34%. This includes at least 4 individuals with severe respiratory problems that IFHC has personally identified. The Fair Housing Act 42 USC 3601 prohibits discrimination by providers of housing and other entities such as municipalities whose discriminatory practices make housing unavailable to persons based on a protected class. In addition, IFHC has concerns that the city is violating its own obligation to affirmatively further fair housing, statute number 42 USC 3608, and that potential approval of this project also violates 42 USC 3604 via disparate treatment and or disparate impact. IFHC is in possession of several reasonable accommodations, requests, and supporting proofs of needs that provide a clear nexus between requests and their respective disabilities and submitted to them to the city on September 22nd, 26th, and again on October 10th. We've never received a response, and according to the Fair Housing Act, ignoring such requests nor entering into an interactive dialogue amounts to a denial, which could be a potential fair housing allegation. In addition, at no time has the city made an effort to acknowledge or investigate the adverse impacts that may happen to protected classes in the diesel death zone due to this large-scale industrial development. Except for Dr. Llewellyn's testimony, the record is silent regarding the human and environmental hazards of cumulative and adjacent industrial development. By continuing to refuse to acknowledge the hazards of this proposed use, like design review and P&Z have done before, the city is in violation of the anti-discrimination provisions of the Fair Housing Act. Known industrial impacts include noise, air, light pollution, traffic safety, vibrations from heavy truck traffic. Diesel exhaust exposure can exacerbate respiratory health and worsening asthma, COPD, general lung function, increase the risk of heart problems, lung cancer, health complications leading to premature death. As a result, tenants may not be able to use and enjoy their own property. Outdoor movements restricted, children won't be able to play outside, tenants confined to their homes, and disrupted sleep cycles. It's no accident that industrial zoning is centered around a marginalized community. Historically, redlining occurred in Boise, though there are no redline maps of Boise per se. We know it was done in less explicit ways via zoning. BSU professor Dr. Jill Gill identified that the River District, Boise's Black neighborhood, was, quote, zoned for noise and warehouse and industrial, whereas white neighborhoods were zoned to protect them, just like what is happening now to Blue Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Question?
Oh, Lori, we've got a question from Commissioner Willetts.
Thank you.
Or Councilmember Willetts.
So one of the things that we have to look at on these is what was considered by P&Z and what wasn't. So what I hear from your testimony is that you do not believe that P&Z considered these as part of their record. Can you give me
These meaning?
Your entire presentation about health risks?
Yeah, none of that information was presented in any part of this process. The applicant didn't present it. The city hasn't demanded it as part of the process when they're obviously known carcinogenic exposures in diesel exposure and other potential hazards. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I had a quick question for Lori too. You've listed a bunch of like very concerning things, but they're all in my mind, really help me out here. They're all in my mind tied to the use of the property, the industrial use. And that's a zoning issue, but we're here on the design review issue. So can you help point me to something in the design of the building that contributes to the problems that you're talking about? Or is your concern really only limited to the zoning?
Well, we could talk about how at some point, along with some mysterious process where a residential neighborhood was zoned industrial, where also it was given a design review overlay that not only made it so it didn't have to go to P&Z and that uses and incompatible uses were considered, but the community was shut out of the process, and that it simply needed to have people scrutinize the landscape design and the building facade and not the environmental and health hazards that people are being exposed to.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I don't think I asked my question very well. Let me try it one more time. So we're here on the appeal from the design review. And you've got a list of very serious concerns about human health impacts, just the various things, really bad things that can be associated with industrial use, which is a zoning issue. And so what I'm trying to get to, like, help me get to a way to find in your favor by pointing to something in the design that's contributing to health impacts, et cetera, because that's really all we're looking at.
Well, the point of discretionary meetings like this, processes, is for you to use your discretion to help resolve conflicts. Your most important mandate as city council people is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the human beings that exist in this community. And that's what it comes down to.
It's a very fair answer. Thank you.
I've just got a question, and I'm just trying to remember the last, because you brought up the design review process versus planning and zoning, then to council. But the last hearing, I know different land, different application, but same neighborhood. Did it go first to planning and zoning?
No, I went to design review. It has a
And
design
then
review
it was appealed to P&Z.
Yes.
And then it
Just
came to
like
us.
is happening now.
Okay, all right. I was just trying, it's the same
Yeah.
process as last time around. Okay,
Right.
thank you. Welcome.
My name is Kara Kane. I'm at 8463 Blue Heaven Lane. Hello, Madam Mayor.
Kara, sorry. Will you just drop the mic a little bit?
Okay. Hello, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm writing to express my strong opposition to case number DRH 220074. An environmental assessment was never done before the city of Boise annexed Blue Valley neighborhood and other operating businesses into the city of Boise. There was never proper notification to the residents of Blue Valley. Using city setbacks should not be allowed with these uses. Blue Valley residents are own property. We are homeowners, not renters. There are children, elderly, and disabled residing in Blue Valley. Displacement of these folks is a health and welfare concern, and all children should have equal opportunity to fulfill their potential. There are two other cases that I would like you guys to look at. That is kind of along the lines with the health and welfare of this case. Sorry. DRH 18-00207 and CUP 21-00026. Low-income seniors are struggling as rents climb higher. Almost half of U.S. workforce does not earn enough for rent. Blue Valley is a mix of price ranges which meets the needs of our communities for the lowest incomes, low incomes, and mid-income budgets. The proposal, 7 buildings for 7 different businesses not ran or built by the said property owner, leaves no way to hold accountability for nuisances. Idaho Code 52-1021. Each business will be able to point at the next one, and the property management company will tell complainants to contact the owner. This will give the complainant the run around, as well as our law enforcement who takes the call. This is unfair to our communities. It's just bad business. This has already happened to other developments in Ada County. The adjacent lots
In Boise, Deb, there was a news article by Gardner Co. Who bought the outlet mall. A spokesperson for the company stated the site could even support places for folks to live. We could maybe even see some housing with all the new jobs out there. Everyone has tried retail on the site. Maybe building a community will work better. The Blue Valley community was never referred to as existing housing in the Eisman area.
Time.
I'm asking you to deny this proposal and put protections in place for this community that were not put in before. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard. Good evening. And then we've got Jane Stanley and Rebecca Kesner signed up, but I don't have you as a party of record. Yep, okay, great. And then Rachel Ford.
Good evening. Richard Llewellyn, 9170 Hill Road. It is highly likely that the use of the proposed trucking bays will produce substantial diesel exhaust. Diesel exhaust has been classified by the World Health Organization as a Group 1 carcinogen. I worked at the International Agency for Cancer Research, IARC, of the World Health Organization with a special training grant between earning my master's degree in biology and PhD in biochemistry. A Group 1 carcinogen is the highest level of carcinogenity. There are only 122 different agents that have obtained this level. A Group 1 carcinogen is simply described as the agent is carcinogenic to humans. I quote from a WHO bulletin, IARC monographs on the identification of carcinogenic hazards to humans. The category of the classification indicate the strength of the evidence as to whether an agent is capable of causing cancer, technically called hazard. This is one hazard that directly speaks to the Boise City Code regarding land use applications of heavy industrial sites. The Boise Code states that M2 land should be separated from commercial or residential development, and M2 uses should not create hazardous conditions. This decision should not render Boise zoning code meaningless. It is the city's responsibility to address these hazardous conditions. Hazardous conditions are not, as suggested by city planning staff, simply the storage of hazardous substances. That is an error. Rather, hazardous conditions are site-specific and contextual. Hazardous conditions in the context of siting industrial uses next to residential uses depend on the boundary conditions and how they will affect the volatile organic compounds and particulate matter that are components of diesel exhaust. In order to understand the hazardous condition, these boundary conditions must be rationally examined. When it is in their purview, a project of much smaller magnitude would trigger an Idaho DEQ air quality model of the concentrations of these hazardous substances. However, because these diesel engines are mobile, it is outside the purview of the Idaho DEQ and falls squarely in the responsibility of the city. The city, however, has presented no rational basis to assume that the width and design of the landscape buffer will mitigate the hazard. Indeed, some scientific studies have found that trees may concentrate air pollution. A recent one is titled Investigating the Effect of Trees on Urban Air Quality in Dublin by Combining Air Monitoring with the iTree Eco Model, Riondado et al. 2020. In order to make a rational decision, the proposed design must be modeled by air quality experts. Building A may or may not contribute to higher concentrations. We just simply don't know that without expert air modeling being done. Unfortunately, the city has failed to take the step of rationally determining the impact of the design on the residents. As such, there is no rational basis to presume that the hazard has been mitigated and the decision was made in error. Please uphold the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane. All right. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Ms. Stanley. And then Rebecca Kesner, not a party record. Rachel Ford. And everybody else that I have that as Ms. Ford is coming up that signed up, I've got one more who's a party of record. Russell. Sir, wonderful. Okay.
Hey, I'm Rachel Ford. I live at 2407 Blue Sage Lane. So the proposed project would be in my backyard. And I guess you have a letter from me in your records there. I'm more, I guess, just putting a face to the name. Here with two of my children. who, regularly use the backyard. And honestly, the field that's currently there is an extension of our backyard. I'm not nearly as well prepared as my neighbors. I don't know if you guys have anything that can, that can oppose this project at this point. But it will be a huge impact. I moved to the neighborhood 4 years ago as a newly single mom with my 4 boys. And it was one of the very few, possibly the only neighborhood in the area that was affordable for me at the time. And it's been fabulous. It's a quiet, friendly neighborhood. I guess all I have for you is an emotional appeal. I am scared to lose my home. We have a ton of wildlife. I've had the blue heron in my backyard. We had a coyote that came through just last week in the backyard. And clearly, those things will go away. So as far as minimizing the impact to the neighborhood, having a 28-foot buffer zone doesn't minimize in the way that they might say that it does. Yeah. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Yep.
Thanks. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for coming down. You mentioned the current buffer. Is there another type of buffer that you believe would satisfy your needs as a homeowner?
I honestly don't know. I guess, like I said, any way that you look at it, it vastly changes the environment. It vastly changes what our home is. Yeah, having a heavy industrial park, behind the house. I don't know what that buffer looks like. What we have now, obviously, as you've seen, there is other industrial things that have gone in, within the past 4 years that I've lived there, that have impacted the neighborhood as a whole, but have left our backyard, our extended, have left space for the wildlife that comes through. So I don't know in terms of this project, what that would look like.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Rachel, just along those lines, so would a buffer the size of what other industries have in your area, would that be something that would satisfy you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Russell, are you planning on testifying? No. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. That's why I was just kept looking at you. And I'm not saying your last name because I wasn't sure how to say it.
Think of a cow, but say a gal.
A gal?
Yeah. My name is Russell Agao, and I live at 8543 Blue Heaven Lane. It sounds like the impact that this project would have on our neighborhood is something that would not be acceptable in your neighborhoods. I don't know how old your neighborhoods are, but our neighborhood has been around since the early 1970s. The zoning is not our fault. Many of us were moved there. My mother was moved there from Atlasta. My grandparents' mobile home over there at Atlasta Park. was situated somewhere near where the paint department is of Home Depot. People who are out there now, we can't afford to go anywhere else. This kind of impact would not be tolerated in your established neighborhoods, but we're expected to, I guess, roll over and say, it's okay because it's permitted. Not all things that are permitted are equitable or responsible. And that's really all I want to say.
Thank you. So everybody else that I had on this sign-in sheet is marked as not a party of record. Did any of you sign up that I didn't call that you believe you are a party of record and intended? Well, Bonnie, if we'll have more with the rebuttal. And we typically don't have folks that are speaking for the applicant. Then that's what I said to, I think it was Mr. Walker as well. Sure. And so for the record, Bonnie Hardy would like to clarify some information. I'm just doing that so we have a record. I'll ask you to do that in the rebuttal, please. I'm going to go to Zoom to see if there's anybody on Zoom that is party of record that is seeking to testify. Is anybody on Zoom?
Madam Mayor, there is no one online.
Just a second. Nobody's online? All right, ma'am, you raised your hand.
Yes, I'm on a party of record and I would like to
Sure, come on up.
get my name up there earlier.
No, that's what you might have missed me saying. I figured that there were some people that
Yes,
had
my
it.
name is Tina Paventi, 2235 Blue Lake Lane. I'm the manager of Blue
Great.
Valley. My husband and I. You know, I was grateful the scouts were here today to be able to see how the city council operates. And they're young citizens, for them to be able to see how the city and its citizens work together. But unfortunately, we somehow got at the back end of this development. And now we're at the planning and zoning, or excuse me, the
City
help me
council.
out. Well, no, it's the park, wherever I can't even think right now.
Oh, sorry.
I'm at that place of, so there's so little that the regular citizen understands about all of this ordinances and all the blah, blah, blah that went on in the beginning. Certainly the scouts didn't understand it. So to catch what's going to be happening around us, we don't always get in on the first step of it so that we can oppose that. And how many I'm in real estate. I've always owned a home. How many of us do not want a single wide moving into our neighborhood? Nobody does. Nobody does. So Blue Valley was moved way out at the edge of town back in 1976. And now we're getting crowded out there. It's not a good situation. Think of the economy is often run by real estate. The police officers that have wanted to move in couldn't afford to. The fire department, they couldn't afford to. We are chasing out people that we need in Boise. And now to lose our development because the ground is going to be moving under us. When you drive down the road, it's so dusty sometimes you have to pull over. I have to wash my car every other day. It's my dad, he's 83. He lives with his house backed up to this berm. Well, it's coming right up to the back of his house. He's looking for a place to go. He's living here because I live here. And I don't know what to tell him. He's on Social Security. He's not going to find any place like what he has now that he's able to afford. And there's a lady in the park that every month I go and knock on her door, take her to Albertsons so she can get her rent money and give it to me because she doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have a car. She doesn't walk well. She can't walk up and push it to the office and give it to me. And she can't the only time she gets to the store, grocery shopping, or to cash her Social Security check is when I take her, the manager, to make sure she can pay her rent. And I walk around that store for an hour so that she can get groceries.
Time.
This is a very common situation. I'm really grateful for Rachel Ford's testimony because her house is across from the office. I have watched her kids for years play in the field back there. And the last time I testified, my concern was for the children because that berm is nothing. Those kids, I'm really worried about their safety. Kids explore. We all know that. We all have kids.
Tina.
And am I out of time? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My proposal is that the R&L thing was a big deal. So somehow you guys knew that we were going to fight this. And we're at the part that we're at the wrong area. We're at the wrong end of it now. But we need 1,000 feet buffered all the way around us. If they could push back their building and eliminate something, let's remind everybody how big these buildings are.
I've given you more like a
Okay,
really,
I
call it a
apologize.
really long run
I
on sentence
appreciate
that I
your
gave
time.
you. But appreciate the suggestion of solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, wait,
Tina?
Tina, you might be back with a question.
Tina, I just wanted to thank you for illustrating a little bit about what people's lived experiences are.
Thank you.
I think it's important. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciated your comments about your parks today.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, thanks. Okay, anybody else? Yes. No, because it's an appeal, we call it a closed record and you have to be on the record. Sorry about that. Anybody that's here? Okay, so we are going, and I'm just going to do one more Zoom check. Nope, okay. Great, we are going to move into rebuttals. First, we have the applicant, Deb Nelson, and then we have the appellant, Bonnie Hardy, but I see Brian Ertz walking up too.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Could I ask a couple of questions of staff? I just want to clarify.
Are you going to do
a
that
couple of things.
first? Sure, go ahead. Sorry, take a seat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. On page 237 of our record, it shows the landscape buffer, I think, as it's being proposed, and a little bit of a adjustment to the site layout. My question has to do with, first of all, whether or not the proposed roadway connection to the north is going to actually be made now, or if it is a cross-access agreement.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg. So that public road, that right of way exists. That road will be constructed and extended to the property line. It will not extend beyond the property line.
I'm going to jump in here. Sorry, Elaine. I'm looking at the picture, but.
So to the north on the western edge of the building that is mostly the buffer is
Gotcha.
Roadway that extends north. Yeah.
Thanks.
And then second question, there's a roadway that comes around the building that is set askew, building G on the corner. Is that a roadway for trucks or is that for cars that might be parking?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, that is a public street. So that will be an extension of Winco Court. So it will be for any member of the public, cars, trucks, both.
Okay, so my question is this, how are the trucks that are going to be coming to the site to warehouse going to use the circulation pattern? And is there a reason that we need to allow trucks on that northern boundary where they'd have a much higher impact on the adjacent residential?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, if I could ask for just a little clarification. When you mentioned trucks on the northern boundary, are you referring to the portion of drive aisle north of building C on the very west of the parcel? On building A, there will not be trucks on the north side. That is a vehicular parking lot. for employees.
That's what I thought I understood about that one, but I'm now talking about what you're characterizing as a public roadway, which would be open to trucks. And I'm wondering why we need to allow trucks there. Clearly, they're going to pull in and then they can pull out either direction at Building G once they do that, and allowing them to pull out and go north and then east along that roadway. To me, I wonder why we would allow that.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I do apologize. I thought you said Building D. Now, referring to Building G, you are correct. Yes, that drive aisle on the north boundary, that is just a drive aisle. That is not a public road. So I apologize. Winco Court extension goes south of Building D, which is
Right.
so.
Okay, good. That had me a bit confused. So trucks will not be allowed to use that drive aisle.
And
Is that
are we
correct?
talking about the drive aisle in the upper left corner by Building G, or G isn't good, or the drive?
Yes,
the park-
yeah, the drive, yes, that one, exactly.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I would ask the applicant to clarify their intentions for
Okay.
that. Leave the proposals that it would be used for truck circulation.
Okay, that's why I ask it now, so that everyone could address it. And then my last question is, while the buffer was extended a bit further east, it appears to me that there could be that drive aisle, roadway, whatever, could be substantially redesigned and brought much further south. And you could have quite an extensive buffer on that corner. And I wonder if that was discussed at all. I didn't see anything in it in the testimony or the discussion at the commission. Yeah, that area.
Wait, which
Where
area?
where the marker was, right there. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I am not aware of discussions with the applicant regarding moving that farther south. I'll leave that up to them in terms of building design and layout. I think shifting that substantially south would require the relocation of that Building G, but perhaps that's a common.
I don't, that's not at all what I'm suggesting. So, okay, thank you.
Are there further questions for staff?
Madam Mayor, I have a
Sure,
couple.
go ahead.
We've heard a couple of times about notification. Is there any requirement that residents are notified?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, absolutely. So the design review committee process requires a notification of residents within 300 feet of the external boundary of the site. That is residents and owners and occupants. So our GIS program and our program analyst has the ability to see when the mailing address on a parcel in the Ada County records is different than the owner address. And both of those get those notices by city code. So that's within the 300-foot boundary. That also includes the HOA and the Registered Neighborhood Association.
Madam Mayor, one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to whether the new zoning code proposal keeps this area, whether it keeps it residential or whether it keeps it industrial around
Madam Mayor.
the site?
Yeah, Councilmember Willetts. So our proposal in the new zoning ordinance is a straight across conversion of zoning. So what is industrial today would convert to industrial in the future zoning code. Both of these properties are industrial currently and would convert that way.
Okay, thank you.
We had a couple folks reference a process around Indian Lakes. And I'm wondering if you could refresh the council on that process.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, that process was a rezone and annexation process. There were multiple parcels on both sides of the new Orchard Street extension. So south of Gowan Road, if you recall, over near Indian Lakes Golf Course, there were parcels on the east side of Orchard and parcels on the west side of Orchard that were zoned A1 and A2. The Planning and Zoning Commission acted on those, forwarded the recommendation to council. The A2 parcel that was closest to Indian Lakes was removed from that rezone proposal. So again, it was a rezone application, not a design review application.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I've got a question and it makes sense in my head. We'll see if it comes out that way. So if this is zoned M2D and the private owner, has purchased this land zoned M2D, and me as a city council member, or maybe all of us as city council members, we decide that we don't like that zoning, do we have any authority to go and say, we're going to change that zoning? Or does that applicant or does that landowner have to come to us with a proposal? Do we have any power to go in and change zoning that a private owner already owns?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I think the zoning code rewrite that was just brought up is a good example of the city having an opportunity to rezone lands. We are going to rezone the entire city with the zoning code rewrite. So we do have the ability, but it would be, what the impetus for that would be is very different in a situation like this, right? So the zoning code rewrite, we are rewriting the zoning code for the city. It is broadly applied. I am not familiar of a situation where the city has taken a very specific property and forcefully rezoned it.
Okay, fair enough.
Madam Mayor? Yeah, thank you. I don't know if this question is for you or for legal, but we've heard folks mention that where this residential area was grandfathered in. What does that mean? And what is our responsibility to those folks once that has happened?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to have staff take this rather than legal making statements from the bench.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez. So grandfathered rights it's a term of art in the zoning code. It is a defined term. What it means is that a use existed prior to the zoning ordinance being in effect. Or the use was present prior to a property being annexed into the city of Boise, which I think is the case here. The grandfather rights do protect Blue Valley's existing use. So although they would not be an allowed use in the M2 zone, if this was blank land, came in and proposed a residential subdivision that is not allowed in the M2 zone. They were there before it was annexed into the city. It is a grandfather use which protects their right to be there as long as the use stays as it is.
Madam Mayor, just to follow up, once that's happened, is there any sort of responsibility on us as a council, on us as an entity, once that decision's been made in how we make further decisions that may impact those folks who've been grandfathered in?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, I think that really depends. There are certain actions in the zoning ordinance that require very close consideration of adjacent uses. A rezone, if the owners of this parcel wanted to rezone this parcel, there are findings in the rezone process that talk about compatibility with existing uses. Where both properties are zoned industrial, there is not a quote unquote responsibility within the design review process to take that zoning into consideration. We have increased setbacks when residential uses or zoning are adjacent, which is the 15 feet that has been mentioned, I think, a few times tonight. If this was not a residential use on the adjacent parcel, the building setback would be 0 per our zoning code. Because it is a residential use, that increases to 15 feet. So when both properties are zoned, but there's a residential use on the industrial zoning, that's how that is taken into consideration, is through those setbacks in the zoning ordinance.
Are we looking at this wouldn't be part of the decision, but I'm curious, in the rezone, are we looking at changing the setbacks where residential meets industrial?
Madam Mayor, I couldn't speak to that precisely. I can do a quick little bit of research, but off the top of my head, I do not know.
Thanks. Anything further for staff?
Madam Mayor, so if we were rezoning something, we wouldn't allow an R2 next to an M2D, but we would in code, if it already exists, we do allow it. It just requires additional setbacks. Am I getting that right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that's essentially correct.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. One last question along my line of questioning. Josh, the public road that would extend to the north at the western edge of Blue Valley, is there a reason it has to be built today to that edge, or could we take a bond for it to be built at some point in the future if there's a need to connect it?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg. So the extension of Warehouse Way was required by ACHD as part of the traffic impact study, as part of the larger circulation plan for the property. The extension to that north boundary is their policy, where there is existing right of way that they extend to that. I believe that the applicant could, and maybe they can speak to this through their discussions with ACHD, but they could pull that stub back and construct a turnaround somewhat off the property line. I don't, and again, I'll rely on the applicant to speak to this a little bit, but I don't believe there's a requirement that that actually touch that north property line.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Josh, we heard a couple of comments about the current grading of Blue Valley and the adjacent property. Can you talk to how the berm and that kind of visual filter or screen between Blue Valley and the proposed development will interact with that grading?
Yeah. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Wooding. So in this area, the topography generally slopes to the north because it's coming off of the bench that's farther to the south and sloping towards essentially the river eventually. So this site does slope pretty substantially from south to north. So that's when the applicant needs to grade it flat in order to construct these buildings and parking lots, et cetera. You end up finding a middle ground of that grading, right? So it ends up being somewhere, it's not at the low point because that would require an extreme amount of cut at the south end of the property. So it finds a middle point. That ends up being, I think the number that was referenced tonight is 12 feet above the grade of Blue Valley to find that level ground for their construction. So essentially, I think it has also been mentioned tonight that berm does end up being quite a bit lopsided. So it is very much lower on the Blue Valley side than it is on the applicant side. The berm does go up with a fence on top to provide some vertical relief from the applicant side, and then drop steeply down to the Blue Valley side with trees on top of the berm. So granted, if this site was lower than it is, you would have a more enhanced buffer because that berming would be greater on the side of the property that is being developed. But because of that elevation change, it's somewhat limited in what they can do, but they have done what they can in terms of maximizing that through the berm that does go up from their side, through the fence on top of it, and those trees proposed essentially.
And Madam Mayor, it's a little bit hard, Josh, especially looking at these plans on computers and not on printouts, to figure out how wide that berm is before it gets to the parking lot. So from the lot line to the parking area, what is that width?
So approximately 50 feet from the Blue Valley property line to the top of that berm.
Okay,
Wait, thank you. Sorry. Did you say to the top of the berm or to the parking lot?
I apologize. That would be to the back of the parking, to the edge of the parking. That would be approximately 50 feet, with 120 being the total distance to the building.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I do have one more question, and then I can give it a break until we hear from the rebuttal. One of the folks who testified, and I apologize for not remembering exactly which person it was, mentioned something about the city owning property on the other sides of the housing. And I'm just wondering which one of those pieces of property the city owns, or if we do.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, some quick GIS research here indicates that we own property on the north side of Blue Valley and also that parcel on the east side. So it'd be on the extreme left-hand side of the screen here.
Josh, can you help us out a little bit more? We need a better visual.
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, so you can't see it on this visual here, but on the north side of Blue Valley is a vacant parcel along
On page
Eisenman.
233 of the packet, there's a map.
So we do own that. And then on the visual on the screen where the cursor is at the extreme northwest corner of the property, this property to the west, that is city property.
Oh, west, okay.
And then that piece of property that's directly to the, for some reason, I'm calling that the south, but it's where we can see the two kind of dirt roads in the upper left corner.
Councilmember Halliburton, we do own that as well.
Okay.
Wait, what were you just pointing to?
That area the city owns.
Okay.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
I'm sorry to have to go back to Councilmember Wooding's question about the grading because your answer confused me.
Sorry.
That's okay. Condition 23 says that perimeter grading shall be designed to match the existing grade of the adjoining
page is that on?
properties. 85, it's the 23rd condition. I think it's also on page 6 of the. Yeah, go to page 85, condition 23. So it provides perimeter grading shall be designed to match the existing grade of the adjoining properties. And what I pictured when I read that was whatever happens, the grade at the perimeter is going to match the existing ones, and then the berm will be X number of feet above that, up and down. But then you described kind of a diagonal step, so they can help me.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent. So apologies for any confusion. Yeah, when there was a mention of this site being 12 feet above Blue Valley, it's not like a shear wall, right? That does it transition through that berm area. So picture if the berm was not there, there would be a slope from the Blue Valley property up to what is the parking lot. It wouldn't be an abrupt edge. So that is where that grade is matched. The berm kind of enhances that difference in elevation and providing that visual barrier.
And then what happens inside the site? Then do they level the whole thing or does it get stepped?
It's not entirely level. Certainly, there are requirements for drainage into retention basins. You can see them on this map, in dark green. There are areas throughout the site where stormwater is directed. Roads have grades. So I'll let the applicant speak. Grading plans are fairly complex, especially on a project this large. So it's certainly not flat, but essentially compared to current conditions today, it would be considered flat.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I want to add one more question to this line of questioning. It's my understanding that the site also slopes from east to west, at least from some of the testimony that we heard tonight. And I think the concern of residents in Blue Valley is that while one end of that berm may provide nearly 25 feet of grade protection, the other end might only be 5 feet if the slope is as was represented to us on Sage Lane, Blue Sage Lane. How will that be handled?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, so you're correct. It does drain to the north and also to the west. There's kind of a split where that does occur in both conditions. I am not familiar enough with the drainage, with the grading and drainage plans to speak, to the heights of that berm along that property line. I would ask the applicant to address that through their specific design.
Okay, thank you. And I would also ask, and I'll ask you, and the applicant can certainly respond as well. There is going to be a drainage way along the berm, and what is the design requirements that we will impose on that to ensure that it doesn't create any potential flooding hazard for the housing behind it.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg. So Boise City Code, and this is not in the zoning ordinance, this is in the Public Works Ordinance, but it requires that stormwater is retained on site. So through the grading and drainage permit for the property, the applicant will be required to demonstrate that through engineering calculations. I don't know their exact retention method along that north boundary. There was mention of a French drain. That's a subterranean drainage area that captures stormwater, but by city code, their stormwater must be retained on site.
Thank you.
Further questions for Josh? All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for rebuttals. I'm doing that because I know we'll have lots of questions for you all too. So thanks. We'll start with the applicant. Oh, let me just make sure. Elaine, are you with us? Council President? Great, thanks.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, a lot of great discussion here, a lot to respond to. So I'll kind of race through it and then maybe you can ask me more questions after if you've got additional questions that you want me to focus on. Just maybe some of the more recent discussion, Council Member Halliburton, you asked about, could you in the span of a DR application change the zoning? And the answer is no, that an applicant is entitled to the zoning code as it exists and the zone as it exists at the time of filing the application. And so that wouldn't be the time that the city could take an action to rezone a property. And Councilmember Sanchez, you asked about grandfathered uses, and I would add to what Josh answered to say that grandfathered uses cannot be enlarged. And if they discontinued their own use and activity there, they cannot be replaced. And so they have very limited opportunity to exist because they're contrary to the code and are simply there as non-conforming uses. Council Member Clegg, you asked about the road. That Warehouse Way is the one that extends along the west side of the property. Winco Court comes in perpendicular to it. The public right-of-way already does exist for that Warehouse Way all the way up to the property line on our north end. And it is shown in your Gateway East Urban Renewal Plan to continue north through the city property to provide connectivity. And so we are building that out in conformance with plans. Per ACHD's conditions, we will build that. We can provide a temporary cul-de-sac that's signed for future extension at the property edge or onto the city's property if the city agrees to that. As far as the use of that road, we do need the circulation pattern to get around that building G on the west side. It was purposefully oriented to put the loading docks on that west side to space them further from the neighbors. In addition, and if you can we pull up my presentation of the landscape plan? The design review committee actually did add a buffer area that maybe wasn't shown on the site plan. Let me get to it. So if you look at that area that's just to the north of that building G, you can see there is a landscape berm that's actually provided there, a little landscape area. The design review committee looked at exactly the issue I think you're talking about, Elaine, and asked to add some landscaping there to make sure there was additional screening from that building and that roadway. It's also important to note there's some significant site constraints here. The pipeline runs along Winco Court and right up into that northwest portion along immediately to the northeast of building G. And so it cannot be reoriented. It is as far north as it could go. And so the roadway does need to circulate in that way to provide access. a few other issues to run through from the neighbors in very short time. Grading was touched on, so I appreciate that. I guess I want to also point out that all of these issues about grading, you already highlighted the conditions that require the grading to be along the perimeter to match the adjacent property. There will be drainage at the bottom of the berm. We do have to keep all of our drainage on site. And the grading conditions call for us to do, as minimal grading as is necessary. But more importantly, I think it's important to remember that you have a whole public works department and city engineers that will be reviewing all of these issues. We cannot proceed with any development if we don't have their approval of all of these conditions with grading, fire reviews, blasting, geotechnic reviews. And so that will all be part of any construction that is going to happen here. The parking area, I think that's already been discussed about the distance to the property is 50 feet. The berming will also protect against any lights there. And there are no loading docks on that side. There is no fair housing issues here. There's no municipal policy at stake impacting housing on our property or our adjacent property. After this DR decision, our uses will remain the same in the M2 zone. So will our neighbors will remain the same as they have as grandfathered uses within the M1 zone. There is nothing about this decision that is impacting the makeup of the existing residents there. It's not changing that. And as has been discussed throughout, this isn't a zoning decision. This is a design review decision. And the commission did properly take into account the distance of the truck bays at 380 feet from the property line. So they did take into account the impact of idling trucks, of safety, and the sequence of building A was also a condition where they took into account what the site design is doing to address those concerns. In the end, this council cannot make a new decision without finding error. And there was no error by the commission. I'll
Thank you.
stop there. Thank you.
Questions for Deb?
Madam Mayor.
Jimmy, is it okay we go with, thanks. Council President?
Thank you. Thank you, Deb, for addressing my question. I have a question back. I guess what I was thinking is, why would you align that drive east-west instead of aligning it with Winco Court and having it come down and meet Warehouse Drive at that same intersection, especially in a truck making the turn as you have it today is quite a tight turn, and that would be a much less tight turn. That would allow for a much larger buffer on that northern boundary, and you could do all kinds of things in there that you can't do in the 50 feet that you've got for part of it today. The other, I'll add this, the other question is, there appears to be a fence or something along that. Is that a sound wall? I was looking in the conditions. I was trying to figure out what that was.
Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, are you talking about along immediately in that new landscape area I pointed out immediately north
Yes.
of Building G?
Yeah, immediately north of the service drive along it. What, I don't know what that is. Is that just more landscaping or is that something else?
Mayor,
I can see the trees, but the line, the darker line.
Mayor and Councilmember Clegg, we're just trying to determine if there, it doesn't sound like there is a fence proposed there. And the applicant is willing to put one there if it can fit. That area, that entire triangle is constrained by the pipeline. And so the detention pond was sited there also next to that because that was the only space that was left that could be utilized for that. So if the road could be relocated without impacting the pipeline and the design there of the limitations of the site, which are significant from that, then the applicant's certainly open to that. But that's the constraint we're worried about.
Okay, I can understand that. I didn't know if that was the case, but it does seem to me that it would it would provide a much, frankly, a much easier use of that turn for one thing, but also provide that a lot of extra space between where the actual moving trucks will be and the Blue Valley. So I would ask that we'll figure out a way to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Halliburton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think you mentioned just a second ago in your rebuttal that the idling trucks for building A, the closest they're going to be is, you said 380 feet. Is that correct?
Councilmember Halliburton, that's correct.
And is there any specific reason for that distance? It just happens to be where it laid out in the map, or is there a scientific reason that says like idling trucks should be this far away from a neighborhood? Or
Councilmember Halliburton, that was the discussion that the commission had when they, in response to the testimony that was provided about that concern. When you look at the setbacks of what is called for in your zoning code, as Josh pointed out, when you have M2 zoning next to residential, it goes from a 0 to 15 foot. And we've taken that 15 foot to 120 foot. And the commission recognized that, but then also wanted to know what was the distance from the property line all the way over to the loading bays to take into account, to just to be considering the impact of the trucks. And they were satisfied with that evidence that it was 380 feet, that orientation addressed that concern. They did add the condition, relative to this point about the sequencing, because they wanted to make sure that Building A was providing that screening from the beginning.
Madam Mayor, thank you for that answer. So for Building G, I guess on we're going to call that the southwest side. It's in the corner there.
Northwest.
Northwest.
Top is north.
For Building, okay.
G, are you saying G isn't good?
Yeah, Building G isn't good. So there's idling trucks behind the building there as well. Is that correct?
When they are idling, they're not always, and there's conditions that limit that as well for the operations. But yes, that is, the truck bays are behind Building G.
Yeah, so other large trucks are there.
Yes.
Is that about the same distance, 380 feet from the neighborhood? Do you know the distance from those trucks as well? Because those look to me like they might be the ones that are closest to the neighborhood.
I don't know, but we may be able to get you a measurement on that. They're not closer than the backside of Building A.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I've got a follow-up question on that. So now I'm better following the council president's line of questioning. So the bays are on the top part of Building G as in good. And so then this road that the council president was asking about is how the trucks would access that top corner of Building G.
Mayor, that's correct, in a circulation pattern there. And she was asking if we might move that corner to not be such a sharp corner down, to provide a little more space between that road access. The public road right of way for Warehouse Way goes up to the property line already and has plans to continue. But I think just as an on-site circulation, if we can accommodate it with the pipeline, we would be willing to look at that.
And are there loading bays on both sides of Building G?
No, they're only on the back, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Actually, I'll ask you about that then. Why on the back versus the front?
Madam Mayor, that was actually intentional to pull them further away from the neighbors and to create additional buffering with the building.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor, I have a question. You've given some examples of what I would call like going the extra mile, trying to make sure that you're trying to accommodate this as much as possible. Can you give us any others? You've talked about the 15 foot talked about the north, and then gone to 120 feet. Are there others that you'd like to make us aware of?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, I also pointed out in my testimony, just to remind you that the proposed buildings here are 40 feet to the parapet. And the zone here would allow 55 feet. So that is a lesser impact on the neighbors. The conditions of approval also do require on that Building A to pull the mechanical equipment back to further reduce that. And of course, this landscape area that we're talking about is significant, where it is a 50-foot wide landscape area with a 16-foot tall at its peak tiered berm. And so it's creating significant buffering for noise, light, screening, visual aesthetic. The conditions require the trees to be staggered and to be planted at spacing that will really create that solid screen. I think the phasing then is also, it of course has been required of the project. I think that's really what's also going to create additional accommodations for them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the phasing of the project?
The building A going in first.
I
That was
see.
something that was requested early on from the neighbors. It took some work with ACHD on subdivision phasing to be able to do that. But we have worked through that and that can happen now.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, thank you. Now we'll have the appellant, whoever of you is coming up first, come on up. Or you can both come up together if you'd like. Oh, the three of you. Great. Well, you can pull some chairs up here if you just want to be here.
Madam Mayor, members of the council. This body's interpretation of its ordinance is entitled to a strong presumption of validity. That's Evans v. Teton County. The presumption of validity applies to both substantive ordinances and procedural. Davisco Foods, quote, M2 uses should not create hazardous conditions. That's 110406(1)B. You have the discretion to interpret your ordinance to protect these people, and you should use it. With respect to Councilmember Badgin's question about design, you can do that by providing much more space between the idling diesel trucks, which the only factual evidence on the record that's been presented by Dr. Llewellyn, an expert in the field, demonstrates will create hazardous conditions. Now, we know that there are more Latinx members of this community and disabled members of this community. The standard is not, as the applicant's representative said, that it has to change the makeup of the community. The standard is it will have a disparate impact on the community. The Ninth Circuit says that 20% is sufficient for prima facie showing to evade a motion to dismiss summary judgment. Okay, you've got 100% and 300% of the community members being overrepresented by protected classes. This is what environmental injustice looks like. This is how it feels. This, right now. When I teach at Boise State environmental ethics, which is another hat I wear, I talk about Standing Rock, I talk about Silver Valley up north, and I talk about Blue Valley right here. This is what environmental justice looks like. These people never had the opportunity to change the zone because it was bare land. So they couldn't show the necessary harm or injury on a map. In order to bring it to court and have a voice at that rezone stage, you have to show actual injury. They didn't have that opportunity because it was just on a map. This is where this injustice is rectified. This is the first opportunity. And so that's the due process basis of the challenge. Now, the planning and zoning's conditions are arbitrary and capricious because there is no evidentiary support to suggest that those changes will eliminate the hazardous condition. And you heard from Dr. Llewellyn that they won't. You've got requests for reasonable accommodation under federal law. There's the supremacy clause, which says you get to pay attention. In fact, you have to pay attention to federal civil rights statutes to prevent this environmental injustice from happening. Because that's what this looks like. That's what's happening right now. That's what this feels like. It always feels like this. There's nothing we can do. That's what it feels like. That's how it happens. There's nothing we can do, but there is something you can do because you have robust opportunity to interpret your own ordinance to apply that hazardous condition standard which exists expressly. In fact, it's even sufficient as an express standard under LUPA that LUPA requires to interpret your ordinance to protect these people. This would never happen in an affluent community. And I think we all know that. The design issue is the proximity to diesel fumes. P&Z considered the question of hazardous a little bit, but mostly the staff has been ignoring it. P&Z has been ignoring it. Everybody's been ignoring it. But the proximity to the idling trucks is the issue. Dennis.
And I just want to point out time. So I'm going to have you two choose who.
I'll try to be brief.
Well, there's 42 seconds. So I want you and Bonnie to work out
I
between
think
the two of you who's going to have the last word.
So I don't get my 3 minutes as a citizen.
No, because you're here as the appellant, which is what I explained to the gentleman as well.
I'd like to clarify a few things as far as the buffer goes. That was CCDC's public outreach findings. I have it here. Preserve existing affordable housing, protect from industrial uses via buffer or other mean. And they said preserve and promote existing underperforming commercial, make sure that industrial sites are away from residential. It references their buffer twice in this document, and it was used for their eligibility study to get approved as a URD. And also it's shown on one of their progressive maps for their 5-year increments. It shows a zigzag red line where they would provide the buffer. And
Thank you.
just one quick thing.
I'll give you one more thing. And
Okay,
then,
one more thing.
and
Indian,
I'm gonna warn you, I might have to cut you off if it goes
okay,
long.
no, it's quick. Indian Lakes, as far as that goes, it did.
Oh, I'm gonna, no,
Okay.
I asked staff about that for a reason, so we didn't have to cover it in rebuttal. And the council's aware of that process with that reminder. So since we're at time, I'm not gonna allow
But the
that.
information was inadequate.
I asked about the process. Are there
Okay.
questions? Are there questions for Bonnie? Or actually for any of the three of them? Because this is the time to ask questions.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'm trying to formulate how to ask this succinctly to elicit an answer. Is there anything that could be done on this design review specifically that would alleviate your concerns?
Yes.
Can you
The
elaborate?
size of the project is really something that can be worked on, allowing the 1,500 feet like other major cities give for residential, butted up against industrial. So we're saying, this is a large 1.29 million square feet project. Every spec of that property is being used. I'm saying, let's downscale it. This is something TOK also wrote in their newsletter one month. They were referring to this. Downscale it and give us the buffer, the protection that CCDC promised us and used us as an example for their eligibility.
Further questions?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to hear the gentleman if we have time.
Yeah, you just have to ask the question.
Okay, I'd like a specific example of what would alleviate concerns.
And we need specifics here.
Okay. Well, I'll be as specific as I can be, since I'm not an engineer, et cetera, but there is data on your record that talks about distance, and the berm that we're talking about needs to be grand, not minuscule like it is. And that is not dictated by design review. They have the discretion to make it larger if they want. They've already demonstrated that they can do that. So I think if we were to sit down with someone who had the authority to make this happen, larger berm, if you want me to be specific, I could be. I don't think it's necessary right here, but it needs to be much, much larger than it currently is. To be fair, it's still not going to be fair, but to be fair to the tenants of Blue Valley, this berm, this buffer that you're talking about is insufficient.
Thank you. Further questions? All right. I want to make sure I'm closing the record now, right? Yeah, okay. I'm going to, and actually, Council President, did you have any? I just want to double check before I close the record.
No, I think I've asked my questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the record, and I'd prefer that it's all right for us to have a little bit of discussion, but if it turns into deliberation, I'm going to ask that a motion be on the table.
Madam Mayor, I'll just make a motion if you want.
Oh, sure.
Madam Mayor, I would move to deny the appeal and modify the findings to reflect the findings of the Design Review Committee as affirmed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, with the added condition, if possible, consistent with the pipeline, attempt to soften the turn at the northeast corner of Building G.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Madam Mayor, the problem here is that this is an allowed use in an existing zone, the proposal for which complies with all of our design review requirements and the comprehensive plan. This applicant is literally building out the comprehensive plan. The proposed use is in tension with an existing use, the residential use, but that's there only because it's non-conforming and conditional. So to allow that non-conforming conditional use to trump the allowed as right uses in the zone and the comprehensive plan is literally revising and amending the comprehensive plan on a one-off basis. And that's just the opposite of what comprehensive plans are for. This would be really straightforward if it weren't for the justice issue, the emotional, like real issue, that there are real people. The zoning is not their fault. In many cases, the means they have available to them to adapt to this change in use aren't going to be sufficient to give them an easy way out. I took to heart the comment that we're pushing out of the city the kinds of people that we need to run the city, and it's true. But the law is the law, and the property rights are the property rights. We can't let we can't make decisions that conflict with that. And again, so the fact is, the proposed use is allowed as a matter of right in the zone. The zone was put in place pursuant to the comprehensive plan. The proposed design meets all of our requirements. And to go the other way on that, in order to preserve an existing non-conforming use that conflicts with the zone, conflicts with the comprehensive plan, is just to not follow our comprehensive plan.
Madam Mayor?
Mm-hmm.
I've been out to this neighborhood before. I've ridden my bike through in the wintertime a couple winters ago and saw the waterfowl in the pond. So hooded merganser, that's the type of duck that was out there. So I know the neighborhood, and I've been out there before. There's been a lot of people saying that you would never do this in an affluent area. We wouldn't be considering something that we wouldn't allow this to happen unless there was zoning that would allow it to happen. And so in my mind, it doesn't have anything to do whether it's an affluent or not affluent neighborhood. It has to do with the zoning that borders the zoning. And in any circumstance, no matter where it was in the city, we would have to consider things that way. I don't want these houses to go away. I think that they're important houses and important people live there. And it's a really unique and really cool neighborhood. What I don't want it to happen is that I don't want it to look like the movie Up, where there's these great little houses and this great little neighborhood surrounded by huge things on every single side. I don't think that there's anything that we can do within our ability on this particular side. But the city does own land on some of the other sides. We do have a rezone that's coming up soon. And I'm not going to sit here and make any promises or a guarantee. So please don't take this as a promise or a guarantee about what the other sides will look like. But what I will tell you is that I will go and I will make sure that I make that part of a discussion when we look at the property that we own on the other sides of this. And I think that that was requested by someone. And I think that that's something that we should seriously consider. And I promise that I'll take that into consideration and I'll make sure that that conversation happens. Can't guarantee the outcome. I am supporting the motion.
Madam Mayor, I have just a question on the motion to the maker. So I heard about the road. Did you have anything about the buffer?
No.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I will likely support this motion, but I'm going to ask that we actually add some things to it in order to build, I think, an even stronger case that we're doing everything to minimize the impact of this. I think Councilmember Bajent was correct in saying that, you know, the decision before us is a zone that exists, a use that is allowed, a design review decision, and our job is to ensure that in making that, we have in fact minimized the impact. I think that we could strengthen it even more by not just realigning the service drive to potentially align with Winco Court, but also to add to condition G, requiring, although design review said that they required it, as I look at the conditions, it wasn't real clear to me that it was required that the landscape berm and buffer be extended to the northwestern corner of the property along the northern edge to the west of where the Warehouse Way right-of-way intersects the northern boundary. But even further than that, and I would, I guess, allow the applicant, if they're so moved, to get out of this condition by showing sound studies that would show it wouldn't be necessary. But once you get west of the western edge of building A, the rest of the site actually is the sound from the west of the site, rest of the site could in fact filter north, and there's really, other than the landscape buffer, not much to stop it. And I'd like to propose that we also add a requirement for a sound wall, the kind that we have along Curtis Road, the kind that we have along Cloverdale and parts of 5 Mile where they were widened, either on the top of the berm or on the edge of the property boundary along that northern boundary west of the edge of building A as well. I think with those two additions, in addition to realigning the roadway if it's possible, we do create a true buffer along that northern boundary, the full distance of the property. So I would ask the maker of the motion if he'd be willing to consider adding those two things.
Madam Mayor, I certainly respect the intent of both of those proposals. On the northwest side, it doesn't abut the residential use. And then as to the sound wall, I don't see evidence of a sound problem that would warrant reversal on that issue or modification on that issue. But then more fundamentally, it's allowing the conditioned non-conforming use to impinge on the property rights that are associated with the zoned permitted comprehensive plan use. So if the council feels that they want that, they can vote against the motion, but I don't want to make those changes to the motion.
Well, I'll jump in here. Actually, the council could choose to make a motion for a substitute motion if there is said request. So people can either vote it down, or if there's a desire to have a discussion about that, there can be a motion to allow an amended or a substitute motion.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
can I ask the council president to reframe what she was suggesting that's not going to become the motion a little bit more succinctly? I understand your reasoning, but it would help me to just get it in a bulleted form. Thank you.
Thank you, certainly. So I was not suggesting that anything be done along the northwest boundary. I was suggesting that the landscape berm, in fact, that the requirement be that it extend all the way along the northern boundary to the northwest corner, which I'm not clear that it does today. There's a little bit of it, and the road may or may not be realigned. My suggestion for the sound wall was in fact just that, because there's nothing to keep the light or the fumes or the sound from filtering into Blue Valley from that northwest corner. If the road cannot be realigned and the landscape berm as a 50-foot wide portion cannot be extended further to the west. So a sound wall could provide some protection that, in my mind, while I understand what Councilmember Bajan said about allowing a non-conforming use to impinge on a existing zone, I guess I look at it as we have a responsibility to minimize the impact of that existing zone on the existing residential, even though it is non-conforming. And so the sound wall would be along that northern boundary beyond the edge of building A, because there really is not much that prevents light, noise, fumes, sound, everything from filtering north into the residential beyond that building. The building itself is what provides the biggest buffer on the eastern portion of the site.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I'm going to ask for clarity maybe just one more time, and just tell me if I'm getting this correct. You're asking for the berm.
I have a question. I have a request, actually. Can Josh or whoever has control of the mouse, can somebody use the mouse to?
All right, Josh, so there's our berm that's up there with all the trees, and it's kind of a darker gray color along the north. There we go. So Councilmember Clegg, you're asking that extends all the way along the north border from edge to edge. And in addition to that there is another sound wall that's constructed on the portion on the northwest kind of corner.
Nope, other corner. Northwest is other corner.
Yeah.
So berm and trees all the way across the top border. And in addition to those berm and trees all the way across the top border, a sound wall in the northwest corner. That's what you're requesting.
That is, and at least to the edge of the drive aisle for the loading dock. So there, yes, from there to the east to the edge of building A is what I'm suggesting, is where we need extra protection.
And Madam Mayor, to Council President Clegg again, I think when you worded it the first time, did you word it as a request to consider that wall with a sound study, or did you?
I worded it that we would require the sound wall, and the applicant could choose to do a sound study and show us it was not necessary if they wanted, or they could build it.
Gotcha.
Further discussion?
Madam Mayor, with that, I would, I guess, make a motion to request that we be allowed to make a substitute motion.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion about that? All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Man,
Oh, two people, sorry.
Madam Mayor, I have a process question.
Sure.
Are we able in these deliberations to ask the appellant whether that is a satisfactory solution?
No, this is closed at this point. Yeah.
And then the motion is to accept the substitute motion?
No, it's actually, this gets silly, but we have to allow a substitute motion to be put on the floor. So the motion is to allow that to happen.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
so here's my discussion is that I would rather, before allowing a substitute motion, make one more request of Councilmember Bajent to Councilmember Bajent's motion. Is it too late to do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's going to get really complicated
All right.
otherwise.
So I'm not going to support this motion at this time because I think that I might have another suggestion or another request that might satisfy it.
I would point out, though, if you are requesting an amendment to a motion that the maker of the motion has already said no amendments, you could also consider making an amendment to the motion that might come. So just,
I might try that.
okay, great. All right. With that, clerk, let's call the roll.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willetts.
Point of clarification, this is to allow the substitute motion. Yes.
Whittings. No. Bajent.
No.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
No.
What?
Is that a tie?
Please cast your vote to break the tie.
Actually, so then this, I believe that this one dies. I mean, I'll break a tie if I have to, but I believe it just dies, right? Yeah, so it dies. Okay, so no substitute motion is allowed on the floor right now.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
So for the maker of the motion, I'm wondering if you would accept extending the berm along the entire and trees along the entire northwest scape. And the reason why is there are some sound issues, but there are some visual issues as well. The people who are living on a different side of the area, this would block basically the entire lot and provide a landscape barrier along the entire way. And in addition, we could ask the applicant to consider additional sound barriers if possible.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to amend the motion to ask the applicant to consider sound barriers if possible. My issue with extending the berm, barrier, or fence all the way along the north side is that the residential use doesn't abut there, and it's city-owned property around there. So it's kind of putting this buffer structure out into one edge of what is presently the desert and what will presumably become something, again, for the purpose of accommodating a non-conforming use whose grandfathered rights shall not be expanded. So for me, it's just a little bit of a bridge too far. But happy to ask them to consider the sound wall if possible.
Second or concurs?
Madam Mayor.
All
Yes,
right,
I would.
don't know if you heard that, Council President. The seconder concurs, but I'm going to have to ask what was just concurred to.
It's a motion to deny the appeal.
No, what was the amendment?
Oh, okay. I was trying to include it all in one part. The motion to deny the appeal, modify the findings to include a condition where, if possible, consistent with the pipeline, soften the turn at the northeast corner of Building G. And then, if possible, consider a sound wall at Councilmember Halliburton's request.
Sound wall or sound things to address sound issues.
Okay, if possible, to request sound if possible, to consider sound mitigation.
But no expansion of the buffer of the
Correct.
berm.
Correct.
Okay. Council President.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'll point out that the Design Review Committee did expand the buffer, not as far as I would have had it been me, but it does now go almost to the edge of Building G. So just point that out for those of you who are trying to figure out how to vote on this.
Oh, wait.
So the buffer's already been expanded. However, the condition to me wasn't very clear that that's what had happened. I was just trying to clarify that condition a little bit and expand it a little bit. So there you go.
Further discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm going to oppose the motion, and I understand why the council members going there. We've deliberated on this for a couple of hours, and I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, this is so difficult because we have an island of residential surrounded by a sea of industrial. And I understand the applicant's perspective. I have sympathy for them because you're following the rules. I have sympathy for the appellants because they think the rules are unfair. And to add to this isn't going to change. It's going to get worse because the zoning rewrite doesn't change anything. So this is going to continue to be an issue. I can tell that we're all trying to find a solution here. Personally, I don't like the idea of a sound wall. I know that's not a current motion. I think that feels very industrial to me. I think that loses the character of the neighborhood, but I'm going to vote no.
Further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I'm gonna potentially surprise folks and vote. I think I will be supporting this motion. I want to share some of my reasoning before I vote. The buffer has been extended west from where it was originally. The motion does propose to allow the applicant to look at sound barriers. And I'll agree with Councilmember Willits. I actually don't like sound walls at all. However, they do work in some places when used appropriately and used minimally, which this would be. So I'm hopeful that it might work. I understand that we haven't done any studies to see if it's needed. So I think the motion is appropriate, but more than that, I'll second what Councilmember Halliburton had to say about our ability as we go forward, both with the zoning ordinance and with our own land, to look at solutions to this going forward. I think with this vote, we will do what we can on this southern border. And I think we have opportunity to look at other things on the western and northern border of Blue Valley going forward. And I'm satisfied that with those possibilities in place, today would be the right vote to allow this.
Madam Mayor, I'll be supporting the motion as well. And the reason why I asked to not just say to consider the sound wall, but to consider sound measures is because I really think that there's probably some other things that might be able to be done in an environmentally friendly way of potentially extending a berm, using grasses, using sagebrush, finding ways to blend that kind of northwestern edge in with the surroundings. And I guess I would just ask the applicant that you consider ways to do that as you build this out even more.
All right. I don't think I'll be voting, but I want to say a couple things. I might be voting. We have discretion here, and I appreciate what Council President Clegg and Councilmember Halliburton were trying to do with some of the proposed amended motions, because there are, in this process, this is where it comes to, and we're in this circular space where everything's zoned in one way. And I said this several years ago, and I still believe it. And we say we can't, but we do have one time of discretion, and that is when we're looking at the design review and how we mitigate the impacts. And I think it's important too. These are industrial areas, and industrial work will occur. This will likely move forward, and it's been improved in this process. But we have discretion not to preserve a use, and we go into legalese and we're saying, existing non-conforming use, these are people and homes and affordable homes that are really important to our community. And we have the discretion to protect people and health in these homes. And we do that by looking at a design review process and taking the opportunity when we can to either weigh in on an appeal or to make changes to it to improve it, because this is the point of discretion. And I appreciate that Councilmember Halliburton wants to look at how we address this in the zoning code rewrite. I'm talking with staff tomorrow on this and some other things, because there's a way, while not taking away a right that an industrial property has, to mitigate the impact that an industrial property has on people. And that's what we need to take into account when we're looking at what's happening on the piece of property the city controls on either side of this neighborhood moving forward.
Madam Mayor, I wasn't going to say anything, but now I think I would like to. I also recognize that, folks have been living out here longer than I've been alive. There's also an airport overlay that prevents us from doing more residential in this area. That's a real constraint that I think hasn't come up. And it's what causes this area to be industrial, is that it's right by the airport. There's actually sound mitigations that make it so that we cannot put certain types of residential because of fair housing, ironically, in these airport area of impact. So that's, I think, a consideration that hasn't really come up tonight. I honestly think, it's zoned industrial, it will be industrial. And I think that design review did a pretty darn good job. And I think that the developers did a pretty darn good job of building in this buffer. You have a 50-foot green space with a lot of trees. Is it going to be the sagebrush field that it's been forever? No, it's not. But I think that it's hopefully a middle ground that will allow the use of the land and also provide that visual buffer from what will, practically look like commercial and not industrial from that side of the property, because it'll be a parking strip and a commercial building. And then hundreds more feet away, you'll have the loading docks on the other side of the building, not visible from the residential area. So I think that this was actually a well-designed project that takes a lot into account. And my hope is that once it's all built out and during the building, that the developer is really cognizant of neighbors and make sure that communication is good, communication is clear. When things are going to be happening on that property that are going to impact the neighbors, that they know in advance. If there's going to be blasting or anything like that, so that they can be prepared, and that when this is all built out, it's not as detrimental as everyone fears. And I think it's, really about the best that we can do. So thanks for hanging in there tonight with us. And it's good to see a lot of old familiar faces like Kara. So thanks for coming out.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This isn't the first time we've had this neighborhood before us. And, one of the questions I asked was about what does it mean when we grandfather someone in? And what I heard in response was the folks who've been grandfathered in, that, they can't, if they give up that status, there's no going back. It is what it is. But what I really didn't hear was, what is our responsibility once we've offered up that status? And I think that I think that more could have been done to take into consideration the folks who, as Council Pro Tem Woodings mentioned, have been there longer than we've been alive. And, you know, at the end of the day, I appreciate the president's effort to expand those protections to the residents and still be able to honor what that project is. We've talked about how we do need more industrial in our city. And so I absolutely support that, but this is a unique situation, but it is not unique to us. At least 4 of us have heard from this group of folks in the past. For that reason, I will be joining Councilmember Willetts and not supporting this motion.
All right, clerk, will you call the roll? Sanchez,
No.
Willetts,
No.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
4 in favor, 2 opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here tonight and the conversation we had. There's nothing further to come before the council, so
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.